No, it's good stuff. You had sent me an email, gosh, maybe 3 weeks ago to let me join into one of your online sessions, your formal ones, and I didn't get I didn't get an email to click into that. So if you're able to do it again, I'm not, I can't be a regular, and I'm too old to try to apply what you're doing. But boy, I would sure like to see it. So keep me in mind, Darryl. I just love to learn and continue to track what you're doing because you really are onto something, which I think you realize. So that's good.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get that. I try to do it every month for the group that we have. We kind of do a variety of different things, and then each month I'll go do a
Yeah.
deep dive on the things that I've been posting. So, yeah, yeah, I think it's just I'm at that stage, as you all know. You get to a certain point where it stops really being about you and your pursuit
Yeah.
of what you're trying to pursue. All that becomes, you kind of get where you're supposed to go, and then eventually it just becomes about how many people can I help before I'm done. And so that's kind of the
Yeah.
phase
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Just see if I parlay what I know of
Yeah.
whatever's still valuable and get that in the hands of people who want to use it.
Yeah. Darryl, before I introduce you to a few of the people that you might not have met before, when you were on quite a while ago, the the the, the part that resonated with my purpose in having these sessions, you spoke to your minor hockey experience and the embarrassment of it, looking back on it in terms of crossing paths with former parents of kids you coached. And I'm pursuing this mission statement exercise formally with Hockey Canada and all the branches to apply it in coach education because I believe that the best players that you work with will even be better players when they are developed in a challenging way, but all players are given the opportunity, especially in minor hockey. So, uh, Richard Burkeson and Bob Laux are two that have been on. I don't believe you've met them, but Richard and Bob, I'll let you introduce yourself to Darryl Belfry. I don't know if he needs an introduction or not, but
I
he's
don't.
oh, okay.
I'm just hang out with you guys. I don't
All
need.
right. Anyway, Richard, thanks for being on the last few times, and Richard, your experience is similar to mine, although you're a much younger looking man, and you're in Whitby. So go ahead.
Whitby. Wow.
You're a speaker, Richard.
Yeah. Darryl, do you know where that is?
Of course I know where that is. I'm an Ontario-born kid. I was born in Toronto, and I've lived in Toronto or lived in the Greater Toronto area my whole life. Of course I know where
Okay.
the
I'm
Whitby
in Brook.
Wildcat.
I'm in, yeah, I'm in Brooklyn, the
Oh,
North End. Yeah. Originally Montreal and Ottawa. So I see you're wearing a Leafs insignia there. I'm a little bit off put this morning after last night's
that's
debacle, but
all
it's
right.
been 2 months of debacles, so I'm getting used to it.
I have a Zoom call with my employer today. It's always nicer to make sure you're wearing something that's an insignia, particularly after we were on the other side of that, where we've had a few debacles ourselves, but yesterday was certainly not one of them. So, um, you,
Anyway, so I'm involved in coach education and mostly coach education and planning right now, planning the season. I'm with the Girls Association in Whitby.
oh, what an opportunity that is, man! Wow, that's like at some point I want to do that. Like I at some point when I'm all done, which I don't know when that's going to be, but it's certainly going to be sooner than later. I would love to just do something like that, coach education in like a girls program or something along those lines. Like I feel like it's such a like the opportunity to do something truly great might might be the best in something like that. Like there's just so much. I see so much opportunity. I just love it. So congratulations on what I think is like a dream gig at this stage and where things are.
Well, it remains to be seen how much of a dream it'll be or become a nightmare, because when you're dealing with minor hockey boards, which
Yeah,
I've done for eons,
that's true. That's true. Fair enough.
that's a challenge and a half. I admit I'm getting a little bit tired of dealing with some of the nonsense, but anyway, I'll go.
Wally, your mic's off.
Bob Laux and then Danielle Goyette, I believe. I don't know if she's ever been
Oh,
on
yeah.
when we've been on. So,
I
Bobby,
loved it. Yeah.
Bob, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I've coached from the minor hockey level up to pro over, I guess, 40 odd years. I was course conductor for Alberta Amateur for a number of years, and coached with some of the national teams. Worked with a lot of very good coaches, Dave King, George Kingston, Claire Drake, guys like that you would all know through Hockey Canada programs, and just been kind of a lifelong learner. Just trying to add whatever I can to this.
I'll just mention, Darryl, Bob and I, we worked with Dave in Japan preparing for the Nagano Olympics. So he grew up in the school of coach education, as did Richard. The old time level 1 to 5,
Yeah.
little bit more application of science, and I think the fundamentals that we'd like to see somehow seep back into the programs. But um, Bob has just joined us the last few times, as has Richard. They've been really great additions for their insights and their backgrounds. Now, Danielle Goyette, she's been on a couple of times, and she did the mission statement exercise with me, Darryl, and we really got a lot out of it, both her and I. And I'm using some of the things that she said and her approach to coaching now. But Danielle, of course, you're familiar with. You've probably been on the ice with her. And Danielle, go ahead, say hello.
Turn your mic on, Danielle. Bonjour.
Bonjour, comment ça va?
Ça va bien?
Très bien,
That's
très
your
bien.
French lesson for the day. Hi guys, it's a pleasure to join you today. I won't be able to stay for the 3 hours. I don't know how long you're gonna stay today, but you know what? Like the last couple times I was on the call, I really enjoy it because you learn so much from different perspective of coaches here and a lot of knowledge. But today I want to join and again keep learning. It's a good way to learn new things or different way to do things. Sometimes we don't think about, but yeah, happy to be here today, and hopefully it's going to be a great conversation.
Now, Darryl, I'm just going to let you know that in the past few weeks, Matt Holberg has been on. Matt is a female coach, Queen's University head coach, former lawyer who left his practice after 10 years to coach women's hockey. And he actually, in his presentation, talked about the value of his law experience, studies, practice on the floor, in the courtroom, preparation details, and applying it to his hockey coaching. And I think the most significant thing he mentioned was that he never got up in the morning excited to go to work as a lawyer, but every day he does as a hockey coach at Queens. Now, Matt brought up a question. He may join us later today, and I've already discussed it with Danielle Goyette and a few other CIS coaches. Darryl, there's going to be a challenge for those coaches because with COVID, they now are going to be having defensemen and forwards come back for their 5th year. They might not have come back. Some of them have 15 forwards and 10-man rosters, and I don't know what the issue is in terms of balancing and feeling a part of a team when you don't dress, but that was going to be one of the issues if Matt should happen to show up. So just like to welcome everybody for joining. Kim, thanks for coming on. I know you're not taking emails, but for you to sit on this, it's a tribute to the value of it. And I think you're the one that you might have badgered Darryl more than anybody, more than I have, about picking his brains. But welcome aboard, Kim, and how's things in your world?
Everything's good. We're in day 7,000 of lockdown here in Toronto, so I'm getting used to it. But I am taking a little bit of time off. Darryl, great to see you again. It's always a pleasure to pick your brain and learn from everybody on this call. So I am on vacation for a little bit, but as I sat down for this call, my 5-year-old said, "Are you going to work again?" And I said, "No, I'm sitting down and learning." So this is the one piece that stays on my calendar. So I'm very fortunate to be here. So I'm looking forward to it, guys.
Going to school, not work.
Exactly. Although for them, it's sort of the same thing, but yeah, it's lots of fun.
Okay. Listen, I'm going to ask Tim, Darryl, and with you here and knowing your work with your daughter and the affinity for the female game, Tim has been away in Norway working with the
Denmark, Wally. Denmark.
I'm sorry, Tim. My brain damage is still kicking in here. But I'd sure like you to sort of kick off things, Tim. Your experience, what you've been doing over there, and the working with that international team and staying in the female game, and sort of where you're at with that team and what you've been doing. Go ahead, Tim, please.
Well, I think first off, as you all know, it's been a pretty fantastic experience. We've got a really, really terrific group of committed females. Like, they all want to get better. They've all totally bought in, right from the strength and conditioning side, which was a big piece for us, thinking about trying to compete against, Canada, Finland, US, and how entrenched their programs are in particular. And they've all really bought in. We had one girl couldn't do but one maybe pull up last year. She got into CrossFit, did 19 pull-ups this year, which wow. I'm not sure I could do at my peak. But anyway, that's how committed they are. It's been really fun trying to incorporate a lot of the tactical stuff, doing a lot of work, simple work in terms of what Darryl does, but the same sort of stuff like quick release shooting, all that kind of thing. It's a big piece of what we do, and I know Danielle and I worked on that quite a bit at the UFC with the girls there. Just really seeing tremendous progress. We felt extremely well prepared for the World Championship, even though we had 3 of our top 6 or 7 players that wouldn't have been 100%, would have been more like 70, 75%. So in some ways, a bit of a blessing in disguise for us, the postponement. But anyway, just lots of, sort of modern hockey tactical stuff that they've totally bought into, skill stuff. It's just been a terrific experience all the way around. Mike, Wally?
I have a question, Tim. And Darryl, this would apply to you. And working with women, are you finding it easier to do things because of their receptivity and their open-mindedness? Darryl, you work both on the guys. You've done it growing up all your life and the girls' side. I know our last few sessions, Darryl, we've really gotten into how do you approach drawing the line in female hockey. We've sort of, on the guys' side, we talk about guys being different, and you can approach them differently. They have no fear, and the girls are much more sensitive. So I'm curious, Darryl, you're still actively working with professional men, and you're working with national team girls, or you have been, and you're working with your daughters. So any comments on that?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I think is it goes back to the same thing. The common denominator between the working with females and working with males is that there needs to be a set of permissions that are afforded to them in order for, whether it be permissions to fail, whether it be permissions to compete, whether it be permissions to to try something new. The difference is, so those permissions I think are common, and they're needed in both sides. The difference is the boys tend to take more liberties with those earlier. So if the permissions are not available or not made or implicitly like offered, they'll work around the fringes more aggressively and like test the water a little bit. Where I think the girls, you just need to be more. It just needs to be laid out more clearly because they're less likely to cross lines or work off. But I still think the permissions and creating those levels of permissions are critical on both sides. Whether you're working with pro NHL players, there's still permissions. There's some things they just cannot do in a game. It's just not. That doesn't fit the skill set. The difference is that they'll recognize opportunity and they'll take advantage of those opportunities. They won't do it all the time, but they're looking for a window where they can show, hey, I'm more skilled than maybe you might give me credit for. I know with Ella specifically, I've had to go a long way with her to create some of these permissions, whether it be in training. We went through a whole thing. I was talking before about teaching her how to compete more and harder and bring that to a practice or a team setting. And at first she was like, geez, I don't know, like, what are the girls going to think? And I said, well, culturally, you have to figure out whether you in your situation, you have to figure out whether you want to be a driver or whether you want to just be a kosher. If you want to be a kosher, you're not going to be a good hockey player. You need to be a driver. So I'm telling you, you need to compete more. And competition is not a wake up one day, I'm going to compete, and next day I'm not. It's an everyday, all day long thing. And so, yes, you're going to need to compete. And so what we did was we built some permissions for her in her practices. Now I'm going back a year because we didn't do anything really this year, but last year we did a lot of this, and it was, compete really hard against one of your teams. She has one teammate who is really competitive. I said, go against her and compete, like very physical, like drive energy. And then after it's done, skate right over to her and tell her, great job. And see how that's received. And she gets a stick tap on the shin pads. And then next thing you know, they're arranging to go again. And then there was another girl who's not quite as competitive, but could get there. I said, let's go after her now. Get involved, get engaged, get a bit more physical, steal the puck. And instead of stealing the puck and giving it back, steal the puck and take it right to the net. Be aggressive. And that was hard. Like, that was a hard step, but she started to be a driver with this other girl. It's because she needed this other girl, and they began to drive it, and it started to come. It really started to come. But I said to her, you telling me you want to be an elite hockey player. That's what you're telling me. Well, I'm telling you, you don't compete hard enough. And you need to become a driver. And you need to figure out how that can be cool on your team. I don't know how it can be cool. I'm just telling you, there's a few ways you can test it, and then let's see what the response is and kind of go from there. And that's always been something that, over the last year, it's been good. Now she's basically been me, her, and a goalie for the last year. So we just now finally got back into the competitive part. She picked up tennis because I said, you need an outlet to be more competitive, because you ain't competing against me. I'm way too fat and too old, and you're better than me. So it's not much for competition. So she picked up the tennis, but now we're just now starting to play a little bit more. And I noticed it go right into her game, that she's if you want to be elite, I haven't met an elite person yet that isn't a driver. So you need to drive. And teaching girls how to be a driver, I think is tough. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. I genuinely have no idea. All I know is I'm throwing stuff at her and I want to see her get through it and see what happens. So that's my long answer on it. Hopefully
I
you
got a
get
point, Kim. I'm going to ask you, Matt Holberg, the coach of Queens, who's an ex-lawyer. He addressed this a couple weeks ago, and Kim, I wonder if you would bring up his concept. It was just brilliant. He actually, as
just
a lawyer,
quickly before you get started, where I got my information from, I
Yeah.
read a book. I read a book called it's a soccer book, and I forget what it's called. There's a guy, the head coach of the University of North Carolina, who is also like a world-class soccer teacher. I think he coached, I don't know if he coached the Olympics, but definitely national programs. At North Carolina, they won literally everything every year. And he built this thing called the competitive cauldron for his females. And that's where I got the ideas from Drive Ella. It was really to get her to try some of these things, to make it cool to compete on her team, and find the kids who are competitive and get their competitive juices flowing. So go ahead, Kim.
Yeah,
Sorry.
his name is Anson Dorrance.
That's right. That's him. Anson.
now, Kim, Sammy, welcome aboard. Matt Holmberg talked about specifically what you're doing, Darryl, and his way worked for him. Kim, go ahead if you don't mind, please, and anybody else that has anything to add. Matt may come on and he'll be able to meet you later and to talk to him more. Kim, please.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I use the concept of a passenger versus a driver all the time. And often I refer to that when I'm speaking to parents and players about what level to play at. So, if they're sort of a bubble player to make double A, but they'd be a driver at A, I think there's a tremendous power in girls, especially in that bantam midget age group, of being a driver instead of being a passenger. So at a junior level, I mean, Darryl would know this, having watched midget double A for the last couple of years. There's plenty of girls who could skate up and down the wing or stand on defense and be a passenger at the junior level, who are currently playing midget double A. But to actually have an impact on the game is much different, especially at the PWHL level. But I think it's a great concept, because I remember back to my days at Dartmouth, and anyone who's Wally and Tim and Sammy would know Corrine Braden, but she was my teammate at Dartmouth, and she was so much better than me. It wasn't even close when I started, and she became my person. She's 6 foot. I don't know how much she weighs, but she used to pick me up and pin me on the wall. Like, my feet would be in the air. And she was really the only player I ever played against who could do that to me. But she became my one person. She was my barometer, the person I was striving to catch up with. So I'm not sure I was ever quite successful in it, but it sure made me a lot better. But I think in girls hockey, having 17 people with that kind of drive and compete, that you're probably a championship team if you've got that. But I think it's great. And I can, attest to, I sent Darryl a message after his first chat with us about the difference in Ella's game between her first year midget and her second year midget. And I think that corresponds with the year that you were creating these permissions with her. But it was like, transformation is the correct word. Like, she was a good underager first year midget double A, and she was a dominant defenseman in her second year midget double A. So it's really cool to hear, as a coach who, I don't know her from Adam as a kid, to actually hear Darryl say, oh, here's what we did, and here's the things we tweaked in order to make it happen. I think that's really cool for me to be able to observe, from the outside looking in. So I think it's awesome that he can share those tidbits with us.
So further to that, one of the things that I was talking, so all the way through Ella's life, I've told her, whatever the team practice is, you need to figure out a way to make it your own. So inside the team structure, inside of every drill, you need to figure out what's the purpose of the drill and what can I add to it. So is it a situation where you can add maybe a fake So maybe it's a simple breakout drill. The puck goes back and you got to go back and get it. Well, every kid's going to go back and get it. There's no pressure, but none of them are going to use a shoulder check. Add a shoulder check because you can see, oh, what's this game situation? I'm going to add something. Oh, we're going around the net and the coach says pass to the winger. I'm not saying pass to the center. If the coach says pass to the winger, you're going to pass the winger. But fake the pass to the center and then pass to the winger. Like you can add things in. And she became very good at personalizing a practice without changing the practice or having the coach go like, will you just do it the way I want you to do it? That she never crossed that line. So I had been building that from like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and she became very good at it. Now, when we got to this competitive part, I said, this is exactly the same thing, except it's not adding a skill, it's adding energy. You need to find ways to add energy. So it's a competitive one-on-one drill. How can you add energy? How can you drive the energy on the ice? You need to be a driver, and I need you to mess around with how you can do that. And I think that this is a process, and I don't think this is a wake up one day and you try this. I think this is a process, and it starts with, and I was looking at things that I was doing with her and trying to leverage those into, this is the same thing as what we've been doing, but now we're applying it this way. And it really worked with her. And I think that she's really found much more of that, where she can take a practice and see, that it's doesn't have a lot of energy, and she can become a driver. The other thing that we did was a lot of communication. She's over talking. I said, talk to kids in line. Talk to them. Hey, we're up next. Let's go. Let's drive, and try to build the energy with her teammates. And I've seen her do that, and that's transferred into the game. She's very vocal in a game. So my point is, there's a lot of ways to come at this, but it's not necessarily all about being more competitive. It's about using other tools that once they're built, you could refer to those things and say, all those skills we were working on, that's the same as this, only now instead of building a new skill, you're building an intensity or an energy or a competitiveness, or you're trying to build somebody up, after their rep and they lose the rep and you can tell they're dejected. You have a responsibility. Get over there, talk to them, build them up, get them ready for their next rep. Those things are cool. And I love that part. And it's been a fun process with her. But I think there's lots of ways you can go at it.
Yep. Kim, I was really surprised that you went like sort of a passenger driver, those terms. Matt Holberg and the topic he brought, and I wanted Danielle Goyette and Tim Bothwell to be alert to this. His concern coaching university hockey initially was the girls are reluctant to push one another, to compete, to be first for the puck, to work harder than somebody. I think Haley Wickenheiser worked too hard. The other players somehow interpreted her effort and her drive as being almost too much, and I looked at it as something that made everybody else better. Matt Holberg actually had them sign a mock contract giving them permission to compete, to race for the puck, to make contact. And if there was another puck, it was okay. And he had to ask them, if that's okay, is it okay with you? Are we going to get better? And that mock contract was his way. And Matt is on now. So I'm going to introduce Matt, Darryl. Darryl Belfry's on today. And he,
last time I was on, I've met him before.
Okay. Well, then I'll let Matt talk about his contract, because Darryl's talked about getting the girls to be drivers. Our drivers are motivated people that are going to get ahead and get better. And I brought up the point of hopefully you joining us, because your contract that you experimented with made a difference for you. So go ahead, and then Darryl will let you take it from there in terms of what Matt has to say. Go ahead.
Sure. Hey everybody. Yeah, so I mean, and I have to, I don't want to take too much credit for it because I believe I originally got the idea from an Anson Dorrance book that I read, and how he was getting his female soccer players to compete, and he was facing sort of the same issue that I was, and it wasn't necessarily an issue in terms of the players' internal drive within themselves. They were working hard within themselves. The barrier that I was facing was they were afraid to compete against each other in practice, and it was more a relationship issue between them and their teammates as it was their own internal drive. So if I was having them do a drill on their own, usually the internal motivation is there and they're competing hard. But when I asked them to go into a corner and compete for a puck, I was finding that they were holding off. And a big reason was that they were afraid to piss off their teammates, that they would lessen the relationship with her. And so again, kind of stealing from Anson Dorrance's idea, we just talked about, okay, this is the only way we're going to get better. We need to compete at this level in practice in order to compete at this level in a game. And let's all agree that by being very physical in a practice, not to the point of injury, but very physical, that's okay. And it's not going to harm our relationships. And so we all basically agreed to that in a mock contract at the beginning of the season. And I find it just laying it out there and having everyone talk about it and putting it out in the open and agreeing upon it made a huge difference.
I know with my daughter, when we started talking about this whole competitive thing, her every question she asked me back was, well, like, what's my team going to think about that? Well, what are my friends going to think about that? How do I do that? And still, like, are they going to be upset? Like, how does that work? And frankly, I don't have any answers. I didn't have a single answer for that. I just said, in the end, I said to her, you're telling me you want to be a great player. Do your actions match your ambition? Because if you're going to go out there and you're not going to put yourself in a situation where you're trying to get the absolute most out of this practice or this training session, or you are not pushing your teammates to get them to be better, you're not going to get better in this environment. You can only do so much yourself. And so you need these other kids. And so she did a lot of stuff where she would go, like I said, in the line, or she would be very physical with a teammate, and then she would go after she would talk to them, and she would ask them questions. Like she would say, like, I'll give you an example. There was one, she got in the car, she was so excited, and she said, "Did you see that play?" And it was a very physical one-on-one where she knocked the girl down, and then the girl got up and did a spin on Ella as Ella was trying to be aggressive, and she ended up getting to the net. So Ella went to her and said, "I just love that spin. That was great. I didn't expect you to do that." And she's like, when I said that, she said that whole thing changed, because she said, I think the girl thought I was like being mean, because Ella's using a cross check. She's getting physical. She's using body position. And this girl recognized Ella was coming hard and spun off of her. And just a little compliment like, "Hey, that was a great move." It really did change things. And I said to her, I said, "I think you just have to talk to them. Be competitive, but go over and talk to them either before or after, or make a joke about it and say, hey, like, there's no way I'm losing this one." And see, like, try to test the waters. And I didn't know anything about it. All I did was I just tried to push her to try different things. And the thing that worked the most was her talking to them before or after. And that just created a better environment. But she did drive the intensity. Like, there were some tense moments at times. And afterwards, she would say, like, "Do you think it was too much?" I'm like, "Hell no. Like, I don't think you're getting even close yet. Like, I think you got to get even more." But for her, it was like just trying to inch along. But the getting it out in the open, the talking about it, but there absolutely has to be permission, because a lot of these kids, like, they've never been in a practice like that. They've never really done that. They've never had anybody do that. And so it was definitely foreign, which maybe is kind of Kim's spot, where it's like when you have the whole organization, try to introduce it younger. Maybe they just grow up with it. It's better. But when we were doing it when they were already a midget. They're like, whoa, hey, whoa, whoa, what is this? Like, tone her back. We're here to just get wet and shoot some pucks, have some fun. What are we doing? And by being a driver, it was very interesting to see what was going on.
Darryl, I just wanted to mention guys hockey. If you have a fight at practice, and whether it's pro or college that I was in, you were getting there. You were where you wanted to be as a team. When you could push each other seriously that hard, and that's something that I think we're not suggesting girls fighting or condoning fighting, but that line of aggressiveness, the using of vocabulary, assertiveness, that's something that's a challenge in coaching. And I'm really glad you brought it up. Now, Kim, your hand's up. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Matt, and I guess it spills over to Darryl as well. Like, given the lack of physicality, or the lack of players in the female game who have that, excitedness or that enthusiasm to fight for dirty ice or high traffic ice, right? Everyone accepts the outside, everyone wants to have a fancy toe drag, but no one wants to create, initiate contact and create chaos. Like, does that factor in, Matt? And I guess Danielle would be the same question. Does that factor in your recruiting now, right? I would guess 10, 15 years ago, you're prioritizing skill, right? A little bit more than, this side of it. But it sounds like, and in the, the college hockey games I've watched recently, it's still missing. And the players who have it, even if they're not as skilled, actually, perform much better than the higher skill players. So I'm curious, Matt, if it factors into your recruiting now as a higher priority that it did 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, short answer is yes, absolutely. And I think that there's a million different reasons, but the short answer is yes. I think that players are defending better. So pure skill alone won't get you by. At some point, you're going to have to fight for it. Team systems are better, I think. So they're defending the house a lot better. So you're going to have to get in there and get after those loose pucks. I think training is better. I just think that people are bigger and stronger. So you're going to have to be able to push back against that. So yeah, and I think it goes hand in hand. I think a strong mental will to compete. Like, competing doesn't have to necessarily equal physicality. But they sort of do go hand in hand. So if we can find a player with good skill, but she's not afraid to be physical, then she's also usually at that point also a very competitive person. So yeah, I think you nailed it. I think the last 5 years in particular, it's shifted quite a bit in favor of that compete level. Yeah.
I said to Ella, it's a competitive advantage. If you are physical and you learn to be physical and you learn to be competitive, this is a competitive advantage, because I saw the same thing that Kim's talking about. I see on the way up that there's a lot of situations, whether it be college hockey or even like once you get into like, not the national team in Canada necessarily, but on the national level amongst all the countries, there is a clear physical advantage that's being imposed between one country and another. And I said to Ella, if you telling me you want to find your way into a spot, heat, then do you need to add this? Because this is a competitive advantage. You're going to need to find a way to, when there's a race for a puck, you're not racing for the puck. You're racing for the line to the puck. And you're learning how to use your body in a different way. Or when someone comes to the net front, that they're greeted with contact in some way. You have to figure out what that looks like. And I remember one of her best questions she asked me was, how much is too much? Like, how do I know I've crossed the line? Like, where is the line? And I told her, I said, if you're not creating tension, you're not probably doing enough. There should be some tension. And at some point in a practice, at some point in a game, like we're lucky in Ontario, like every game that Ella's going to play against in the PWHL, she's going to play against an elite player. There's somebody's good on the other team that's an elite, considered an elite player. And I said, you need to find your way over to that elite player, and you need to be physical, and you need to create tension and find out what that response is going to be. You'll see it right away. And there's some kids will take the long route, and there's some kids that come right back after you. You need to create that tension. If you really want to be good, if you really want to find your way into the top, this is a competitive advantage, and you can bulldoze your way there with a lot of this type of stuff with your skill. Like without skill, it doesn't matter. But if you have great skill and you're really competitive and you do it as a habit, not a every once in a while thing or when someone pisses you off, this is an everyday deal for you. To me, that's a competitive advantage. But it takes years to build that. That's why I started 2 years ago to try to get this going.
The other thing I'll just add is, and this is purely anecdotal, but it feels to me over the last 5 years that a lot more refs at our level are letting more of the physical stuff go. So that also plays into it.
Ella, honestly, I videotape all her games. She had one game where she administered 17 cross checks in a game and did not get a single penalty. 17 cross, 2 of which were at the net front, which were on the side of the poor girl that she gave, like on the ribs, which put the girl to the actual ground. Not a single penalty. And Ella's like, what should I do? I said, well, I'm disappointed in the 3. Like you had 17, but there were maybe 2 or 3 others times where I felt like you could give another one in. Like, keep going. Let's go. Find out what that is. It's an exploration. You're exploring and you're trying to figure it out. And I think that those are like part of it is that permission to explore and see like what does that look like? And I think trying to encourage them to do that is so important, especially with this physicality thing. Exploring it is really important.
I also think it's critical, like, it's a great point you made about the refs, Matt. I was going to say, that is always the issue, especially at younger ages and with bigger, more physical players, right? As they feel, again, that sense of team, they don't want to put their team at a disadvantage, right? So if they're getting, what I would call big girl penalties, right? They feel as if they're taking away from the team. So I think it's really important as a coach how you message that. I have a player who's going to be playing against Matt next year, who is big and physical and extremely skilled. And in midget AA, she just scored by running everyone over. She had great dangles, great everything, but she was so big, so like, she's got a 6-pack and, guns and the whole thing, right? And she would just run people over. Then she got to the PWHL level and it didn't work as well because her skill level didn't trump everyone else's. But, it was very clear to me, her teammates would sort of get annoyed when she got penalties. And I just made a deal with her. I said, a penalty for every goal, please. You get as many penalties as you want, as long as you score a goal for every penalty you take. And she loves it. I still, she'll be gone next year and off to Waterloo, but that's my contract with her. So I think it's really important as coaches, and it goes back to that idea of permissions, right? If in girls hockey, every time you take a penalty because someone's being physical and prioritizing physicality, if you put a negative spin on that, then of course the girl's not going to do it, right? And obviously how her teammates feel about it as well. But girls love the penalty kill. I don't know what it is, but they all want to be on the penalty kill. So I always look at that as not such a bad thing either.
Kim,
just wait, Wally. I just want to tell a story. I'm not sure you're going to remember, and maybe Tim was coaching too at the Oval. But we had like Colleen Sustrick, like Sosk, we call like on defense, like crazy tough, like fat, 5'5", I think, but built like a farm girls in from Saskatchewan, and I was the skilled player from Quebec, not playing too physical. And Wally, I don't know if you remember, but you talked to Sostrick and you said every time go for a skill practice and anything, I want you to go against her and and be physical with her. And I think it was your way to teach me how to be more physical going against the more physical player on their team. Trust me, sometimes you learn the hard way, but it's a good way because this is something I did after, like with the national team. I always go against the best defenseman. And another one was Therese Brisson. Oh my God, like was crazy. She was protecting their goalies like crazy. But at one point I went at Therese went at me like really like crossing the line. She was the kind of player that crossed the line on the ice, and I went at her. But after that, it was over. Like we knew what the expectation and the way we had to play or practice to be able to win World Championship and Olympics. And that's the kind of players you need on your team to push your players, because if you don't have that, it's pretty hard to be a championship team.
Richard Berkeson.
This is really interesting. As a relative newbie to the girls' side, watching the coaches, I think I've mentioned before, watching the coaches, particularly from September to November before we really got shut down, and how soft the practice approach was. And I guess like anything else in coaching, we have to feel our way around what's going to work and not work. So, what Darryl does with his daughter is worlds apart from what somebody is going to do with a team of U13 double Bs or U15 A-level girls. I'm just wondering what, particularly when most of the coaches are male, which is the situation I'm dealing with in Whitby, where all but two of the coaches are males. So what are the pitfalls, I guess? What are the dangers that you folks see in the coaches of younger and or lower level players having a compete contract, but I use it in air quotes right now, with kids, because certainly at the elite levels, kids are more motivated. Certainly on the boys' side, this kind of an idea would just not even be discussed at the elite levels. Like certainly in my experience in junior or AAA, you don't even pick a kid who's not going to compete in a tryout. They don't have a chance. They'll be the 19th player on a 15-player team. But on the girls' side, I don't know. I mean, is this something we should be doing more of? Should male coaches be more cognizant of what the reaction is going to be? It's almost like we need a definitive direction from those of you who have actually tried this or done something along these lines to give to the likes of me and go, all right, you've got your U15A coach. Some of these girls in 2 years will be playing double A. Should we be doing something along these lines?
I didn't do anything with Ella until she was a midget. Nothing. We never talked about being physical. It was all about skill, skating, handling the puck, making plays. Once we got to midget, that's a different story. I felt like that was a different story. And she was able to clearly articulate her ambition at that point, which then I said, that's different. So I couldn't see me talking about giving cross checks at, Adam. I just don't, that's not appropriate. I don't think. Getting body position, learning how to use your body. Okay. Cutting people off, lifting sticks. I get. I think that's great. But being a driver on practice of trying to drive physical play, I wouldn't go anywhere near that until midget. That's me personally. I just don't think it's necessary.
Well, I'll jump quick on this. I think you have to introduce the concept of physicality in terms of protecting yourself, and the girls do clamor onto that quite well. They've seen more than enough of their teammates get concussions or get hurt, and the majority of concussions in girls hockey happen because of incidental contact, where two people are not paying attention to each other and they run into each other, right? So it's always a game of chicken. The puck's over there, they chase, they're not aware of their surroundings, and then there's contact. So I think you get a tremendous buy-in at young ages, coaches, parents, about the protective side of it. So as Darryl alluded to, you're still teaching, gaining inside position and, building the wall and all those kinds of terms that eventually you'll layer upon that, I would call it like inflicting contact, like a cross check, as opposed to protecting yourself or initiating contact. So I think if you start at younger ages, I started at Adam at U11 in earnest in terms of initiating the contact and playing that way, but not in a way that anyone would perceive to be dirty or you're trying to take a penalty or something. But I think you have to build that just the same way you would build skating skills with a building block. The contact has to be taught in the same way, and it might be, your coaches might decide it to be one of the key principles of the way your teams play, right? I mean, in girls hockey, we've said it clear as day here. Physicality is a tremendous advantage. I think it trumps a lot of the skill things that we're spending a lot of time on. So it would be more a question, Richard, of do the coaches buy into that? Are they willing to put the physical side of the game and prioritize it? And if it's coming from up high, as this is going to be the Whitby way of playing, then then again, the girls know why and they're buying in. And if you sell it as protecting themselves, they do have a fear of being injured and injuring someone else. That is a real thing in girls hockey. So I think you can slide it in that way as opposed to the super aggressive side of it.
Tim?
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with Kim there. I think, one of the things you have to think about, Richard, is like part of your job as a U13 coach is to prepare the girls, hopefully, to play U14 and U15. And part of that is, as Kim mentioned, is encouraging, again, not dirty play, but competitive physical play. Not just because it's an advantage, but it because it's a very important part of being a very good player at higher levels. And part of our job is again to prepare people for higher levels. So, I mean, I think girls, if we're talking females, I think for sure at the bantam sort of second year Pee Wee bantam level are certainly emotionally mature enough to understand the concept of, if I compete against you, I'm making you better or helping you make you better. And you're making me better, just the way Danielle described her example with Wally at the Oval there. So I think, certainly Pee Wee bantam level, have at it. Like it's an important part of hockey, male and female both. And I think it's a disservice not to introduce that concept of like just competitiveness. Be the best you can be, because that's what it is about in a nutshell. You can't be the best you can be if you don't actually really compete. And as Darryl's really pointed out in a very strong way, like to just drive to be better, drive yourself to be better, help drive your teammates to be better. And Darryl, I don't know if you saw my note, but I'd love to be Ella's agent. So if there's an opening there.
It's just I view it as all this is a process. And to go to Richard's point of what to do, and I think you got to have a long-term plan of where you're trying to get to, and you have to build these things in as you go along. And it starts off with maybe simple body position for a couple of years and just understand. Then it comes down to kind of how to win a puck and use your body to wrench someone off the puck. And then it transitions to be a little better on the walls, and the puck's on the wall, and how can I use my body on the wall? And then it comes into, now I'm at the net and I'm competing for position at the net. And how do I do all of that? I think it's a process. I don't think it's a wake up one day and say, okay, now we're going to compete. I think you got to have this like long and then be able to leverage things you've done previously to help you then do it. Because the other thing is, I don't think at the ages of 10, 11, 12 that Ella was really like in that like competitive mindset. It just she loved playing and she loved it. She enjoyed it. She was trying to help her team win, but she wasn't like eat nails competitive, where now she's at a whole different level. Like her mindset is very different. She's older, she's more mature, she's got objectives, and now she's trying to get her objectives to match her actions. She just wasn't ready. So I don't think at those younger age groups, like you're going to have a large percentage of kids who are probably like Ella that are like, they just enjoy coming out and playing hockey. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to hurt anybody. They're not trying to do anything too crazy. They'd like to win, but you know, it's more, I think you got to build these things along. And I think that might be the biggest lesson that I learned along the way, is that I think it is a process. I don't think it's a wake up one day, but you think maybe in bantam and midget, you start to get the fruits of your labor, where now this is possible to do these things.
Well,
Richard, I'd like to make a point, Richard, to support your question. Coaches need to be taught how to teach the fundamentals of stable balance.
Right.
And we don't put, there's 3 biomechanical principles. Back in our day, of the level 1, 2, 3 day, we used to be taught biomechanical theory of principles of stable balance. Lower your base. And there are simple activities to practice with coaches in a classroom so that players know how to be more stable and prepared, stronger on their skates in contact situations. And that's a simple principle that has to be understood by all of your coaches. It's not the psychology of coping with contact. It's the physiology of learning how to handle it with the psychology. So if we don't teach those things, and Darryl, as Dave King used to do, free puck races, gain the lane, make contact before the puck in a good position to get it. He had teaching progressions for that. With the double B kids and those beginner kids and your house level, they're going to have to play some bumper car games and just naturally learn to lower their stomach and laugh about competing. And at some point, you might pit somebody like Goyette against somebody like Brisson in a competitive drill. But you need to teach them how to use their bodies. And having coached wrestling, I appreciate the importance of forces and balance more than ever. But go ahead.
Yeah, my favorite course at McGill was the biomechanics one. So yeah, I'm with you 100% on the principles of balance and all that kind of stuff. And I go back to the early days of the checking clinics 35 years ago, and a guy named Dennis Zakuski, who was a teacher up in Alberta. I don't know if any of you guys remember that name, but he was the one that came up. Dennis Zakuski, I forgot where he was exactly, but he was the one who actually started. He was the one who actually started the checking program, and I feel that this has been an affirmation for me, because after watching the stuff I saw this year in practices at all the age levels, I had decided that I was going to start I'm doing coaching education stuff with all our coaches on a regular basis, and we've already done 3 sessions on goaltending. So I'm starting in May with a bunch of things, and the very first thing I'm starting with, aside from the goaltending, because you don't do well without a goalie, is checking stuff. So I'm going to do the checking clinic content. I go beyond the clinic. So what's supposed to be like 3 hours or something, I'm going to make it like 2 or 3 different sessions to take coaches through the various steps of balance and coordination, and as he wrote, staple balance and skating confidence, all that kind of stuff. Because it's the biggest weakness that I've seen in our girls. So hearing from all of you about how important it is to get those kinds of messages across to the coaches means that they'll go into practice practices in games with more confidence to be the checker or the checkee, and goaltenders who can actually stop the puck. So, which I think is important. It's just me. Like I told the goaltending instructor we had our last 3 sessions, I said, I don't know why you spent 3 hours on clinics. Just tell the kids to stop the puck, and away we go. So anyway, all right. It's so simple, really.
Tom Malloy.
I think Malcolm raised his hand the old-fashioned way.
Okay. Well, sorry, guys. Yeah. I just wanted to build on what Wally said. I think it's valuable, and it feeds into, of course, Darryl's original start to this concept of permissions. I think when we're teaching the fundamental skills and players are having the ability to derive success from the environment that we've created, they're building what they're calling now physical literacy. And that physical literacy folds into movement confidence. And then that movement confidence allows that ability to be assertive, to have those abilities to push to the edge of competencies so that we're developing and that we can be, as a player, over that long period that takes to begin to explore the edges of our competencies. And as Darryl said, begin to act with intensity and assertiveness. So I think for me, that's the flow from fundamental teaching right into the edges of elite performance. But I think one of the things that I was thinking about as you guys were talking as well, I think as coaches, we must also look at how we're organizing our seasons. And by that, I mean, you want to look at your overall team intensities throughout the season, because it occurred to me that if your players are always at the highest intensity in practices, you may be finding by the end of your season that you have some burnout. So you want to sort of modulate and control that as well, depending on your practice theme and where you are in your seasonal plan. So that's something to consider. And then also, again, as I was listening to everyone's great ideas and concepts, which was also reaffirming for me, as Richard said, I was thinking about the male game, and in the male game, in practice, if you push that line of intensity too high, the players will make the decision for you that maybe you've crossed that line. And I don't see that happening as much in the female game. And by that I mean, you know, they'll drop the water wings and there'll be a little fighter correction there. You cross that line of intensity, and maybe that's the correction. So I just wanted to add that little flavor in. And then also I want to, the cautionary, I put it in the comments, is that, you know, as coaches, we have to walk that ethical line as well. So intensity and assertiveness is great, but we want to be careful that we're not reinforcing dangerous and injury potential causing type of behaviors on the ice. So rule violation, and it's a gray area. So for whatever that's worth.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, we're talking about Dennis Sikuski. He played at University of Alberta. I play old timer in the Alberta games and all this stuff with him. And he gave a clinic in the mid-90s or whatever, and Wally was part of it. And I was invited over to Finland to do a thing with Johanni Wallsten and Vladimir Yursinov in Finland. And I did it at this youth, it was a youth hockey thing. So I'm on the ice and I did this body checking thing. That was basically the Hockey Alberta one that we developed at this meeting. And Yursinov really liked it, and he was coaching TPS Turku at the time. And Yursinov is kind of a legend in Russian coach and the Olympic teams and all this sort of thing. So he had me do it with the TPS team. And I think Saku Koivu was about 18 years old, and Mikko Makala was playing out the string, and Hanno Virta was playing and all this. So I did this checking whole sequence with the pros, and like they really liked it because that isn't, especially at that time, wasn't a huge part of their game. So yeah, it was a really good process of going through. And right now, as we're doing this, I'm just doing stuff on my site, and I'm doing a lot of things from the Swedish Federation. They sent me these videos, and the titles of the different things are protect the dot, escape from Alcatraz, battle in front of the net, checking from the corner, checking along the boards, and checking and get the puck out. So it's a big part of hockey wherever. So that's who Dennis was, and I think it's a really good idea to be. You got to learn the technique, and that it is safe, right? I think it's really unsafe, not like I see in boys hockey all the time. Coach tells them to go out there and hit guys, and they go running at guys, and the guy doesn't know how to take the hit, and there's injuries. Like Dave King's son, I think the first game he ever played at was it Boston University or Boston College. His roommate ran a guy the first shift and went flying head first in the boards on his own and paralyzed because he didn't have good technique. So, doing the technique is really important.
Coming back to what Malcolm had said a few moments ago, we have to take responsibility for the language too. If we talk about being aggressive versus being assertive, being intense versus being, I don't know, soft or something. But even the word hit, when I do the checking clinic with coaches, one of the first things I say is the word hit exists in baseball and in boxing. There is no hitting in hockey. I'm not talking about the pros. I'm not talking about the juniors. I'm talking about in minor hockey, because the connotation to a 12-year-old who is learning body checking to go hit someone is to go ram them. And I remember the early days I was doing hockey schools in the United States, going back, 20, 30 years ago. There seemed to be a battering ram approach to checking. They wanted kids who could just hammer each other. That is years ago. I'm not sure it's the same now. I rather doubt it is, because their skill level has increased so much. But the terminology is really important, and we don't have to worry about that on the girls' side. You're not going out to hit someone, but protect the puck. Use balance, use your arms, use your legs, use your stick to keep yourself balanced and to keep the puck away from somebody. And kids being competitive in a competitive sport, I think, will take to that. But on the boys' side, coaches, I get coaches rolling their eyes all the time about counting hits, in bantam hockey or midget hockey. What do you mean counting hits? Like, how's that important? So, Josh Anderson last night in the Habs Leafs game, I had like 17 hits and they got demolished. So what does it mean? Really, in minor hockey, it has no place, none, zero. And I think it's up to us to make sure that we get that message across. There's no hitting in hockey. It's like there's no crying in baseball.
I think that education part is so key. I think also having a clear objective of where you're trying to go, what is the purpose of it, how are you trying to move it along, and educating, like the coach education that has to go in. And one of the biggest parts about the physicality of the girls' game that I see has nothing to do with hitting or body contact. It has everything to do with body position and leverage and getting, quote unquote, on the inside. And what does that actually mean? How do you get on the inside? There's a process to that, and learning that process. And there's certain skating skills you need. There's certain balance and, puck control skills, but understanding like cutting off someone's hands. And, up until maybe a couple of years ago, all the checking was stick to puck. And I said to Ella, stick to puck is a great idea, and it's a wonderful skill. That's just not going to be enough. That's just not going to be. You have to get inside. If you want to check somebody, you have to have stick to puck to control where the puck, to make the puck die on that girl's stick, and then you have to go through the hands to get the puck. That's physicality. And in the girls' game, it doesn't have. It's either full on contact, or it's a lot of stick to puck and there's not really a lot of control. Even like stopping your check. So defensively, we just talked about a defensive corner. Okay. Offense is about movement. Defense is stopping movement. So if you want to be a good defender, you have to find a way within the rules to stop somebody's forward movement. So the forward has the puck. They're climbing the wall. You get stick to puck. You get close to them. You force them into a turn. Now you got to push them in so they get pushed into the board so they can't turn anymore. You want to lift their center of gravity and then use a wedge and get underneath them and use a body to position to seal and wedge and pry the puck and separate them from the puck. But it also relates to your escape route. So not only is it about stealing the puck or getting control of the puck or forcing a loose puck, but we also have to talk about an exit. So now when you get the puck, you have your check is now on your back, which gives you now a natural exit to that other side. That's what I'm talking about physicality and a competitive advantage. That's where I see it the most. And then it's testing these things, like how to use your hands. Can you use the top hand of your hand? How do you use that to push someone in to the boards to get them to stand upright, to get them to lose their leverage? How do you use your upper hand to take their top hand elbow to pin it against their leg? Like this kind of stuff is really important. We don't talk about that. We talk about stick to puck, but we don't talk about I'm stick to puck, but then when I get close to you, I want to get my hands on you. And I'm going to have two hands on my stick. And now I'm going to use my top hand on your elbow. And I'm going to come down with my bottom hand on top of your hands. And now I'm going to push you in towards the wall so that now you can't escape. Then I can use my feet and my hips to be able to get control of the puck. That stuff is what I'm really focused on with Ella, trying to get her to become elite at.
I love I love the passion, Darryl. And I think you're bang on 100%. And I also really like the concept of the exit strategy, because what I've seen with the female athletes is that they're so kind of overwhelmed with the body contact is they make contact and then they stop because they want some sort of reinforcement or acknowledgement that, wow, you made contact. And then they forget that you got to get the puck, you got to get out of there, etc. So that's really instructive. And I think it's an important piece. Again, it comes down to that movement confidence and literacy on the part of the coach to give that to the athlete, and on the athlete for them to learn that, I guess, essentially, so that they can continue to execute and then play with that intensity and assertiveness.
But you guys, like Danielle, if you watch the NHL right now, they play more like the women's game than they play like 20 years ago. Like the game is too fast. If you just go for the big hit, you don't really accomplish anything. You have to have a plan, like Darryl talk about. It's better to rub somebody on the board, cut their hands, take the puck, make a pass, and you're out already. We have great defensemen in NHL that were physical, but now they struggle with the game because they go for the big hit, and after that they get beat to the inside. Not, like I would say Weber. Like I watch Montreal all the time. He's struggling right now because the game is faster and faster, and if he missed that hit properly, he has no second plan. In women's hockey, you have to be I'm not going to say smarter, because the guys are getting to being smarter now because the game is so fast. Because we were not able to hit in women's hockey, we had to have a better plan, like rubbing them on the ball, like cutting their lane, cutting their hands. What after? Now I think the games, the real, you can see, like when I watch Maple Leaf, like the real effect on that, because I had some practice with him, and the way he teach, you can see it. But some players have no clue how to adapt to the speed of the game, and the game's going to pass them pretty fast.
One of the good points that you make there, Danielle, is so much in the NHL is made of the shape of your units. So the entire unit makes a shape. And so if one person is overextending themselves for a contact, they're disrupting or reducing this shape. And that shape is so important to maintain. And I think on the women's side, what we do is we see a little more discipline to that shape more consistently. But then the execution of forcing someone to stop and then using that shape in a competitive way, that's where I think we could be better on the women's side. The shape, I
Right.
think, is there more. The discipline is probably too much. And then it's now trying to find a way, how can we leverage this shape to then generate more opportunity in transition? So we get them stopped in the D zone. How do we get out? Do we continue to come up the strong side, or can we use the shape to then create speed on the exit to be able to set up our next opportunity? I think that that's those kind of disconnects are there. And I think, Daniel, you brought it up really well in terms of like the discipline where the NHL is at as it relates to contact, and how the shape has become more important than the contact. The puck still has to be there. If the puck's not there and it's gone, that contact is now, you're disrupting that shape, and that's going to have consequences for us later on.
Darryl, would you explain that for me, please? Shape. I don't quite understand your concept.
Okay, so like if you picture the defensive zone, you have a defenseman at the puck in the corner. You have the center, or the F1 is providing support there. You have your D in front of the net, and you have your two wingers positioned wherever you like them. Everyone has them in different spots. Maybe it's on the strong side dot, and it's on the inside hash mark. That creates like a shape, like a 5 on a dice.
Okay.
Five
Okay.
on a.
Okay.
Now, all of a sudden, you stop the puck, and now the puck squirts loose to the forward, okay? And now the forward gets it. Well, now you're in transition. Well, you're trying to maintain that shape and keep everyone in the screen as you get in the neutral zone. So when we get in the neutral zone, you want everybody to be still in the screen as the camera pans.
Yeah.
And watch.
Support.
Yeah, support. Now we get in the offensive zone.
Yeah.
So what happens in the offensive zone? Well, you have the two guys at the point, you got the third man high, and you have someone at the net, someone at the bottom. That's a shape.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that shape is important to
Okay.
maintain. So if
Yeah.
all of a sudden someone goes rogue and takes off to finish a contact, they're going to be late maintaining that shape on the way back, which creates a competitive disadvantage. That's what I'm saying.
Darryl, I just wanted to mention, for the sake of, everybody here, particularly the females, we created a curriculum in 2000 after the Olympics describing that. Get the picture, get the shape, and play the game. So in the D zone, we avoided using the word dice. We said man on, box behind was the shape. Teaching beginning point. And then eventually, we didn't talk about D and center. We talked about the first player, but of course we mean D, center, low. First guy back or woman back is going to be the low forward ideally. But in today's game, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hockey. But back in that day, man on, box behind, we did walkthroughs of the shape when they were at the hash mark in the corners. And then we went to man on with the first person, stick on with the second, halfway with the third. And that was sort of the progression of teaching shape and thinking within the shape. Decision making as a group of 4 with the shape. So I'm glad you've done that. It's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. It's just different terminology. And I want to be sure of your terminology, because it's going to be the terminology of the future for sure. Thanks.
Well, one of the more critical parts of that is the use of the third player, who's become now most important, I think. We used to talk about the person at the puck and the second person and that layer of support. But now your third player, I think, is of utmost critical. They have the most potential to impact the game. So, for example, if you're in the D zone and you have a center or a F1 and your D are both below the icing line, and you create transition, your net front D is now the center. they have to join that rush. They're the third person that's closest to that element. They are really important in that play to understand what their role is, because they can't be like, well, listen, I'm the D. Well, the center is already 10 feet away from being 10 feet away from being up the ice. They're not going to be in a position to be able to join the rush. You're in the best position. So if you don't go, we lose a competitive opportunity to have at least maintain even numbers through the neutral zone and potentially get odd numbers in the neutral zone. Yeah. And so that third player, as it relates to this shape, depending on where the puck is and understanding what your role is a huge part of tactics now, I think, that has really emerged.
Tim Bothwell.
Yeah, a couple of things I just shared in the chat there as well. That Sammy and Kim talking about bots. Jennifer Botterill, she was a great player, but which ties in with a lot of things here. But she played so many friggin' minutes at Harvard. She played 30 minutes, 35 minutes a game as a forward. She literally played at half speed through a lot of the year, the 2005-2006 Olympic year, and Mel was really, we were all really concerned, that she just couldn't play at a high pace. She didn't play a competitive game as great a player as she was. And, we eventually kept her with us, I think for good reasons. She was so good on the power play that we couldn't afford to leave her off. But she's a good example in lots of ways of the importance of competitiveness, and just learning how to compete and battle for pucks and play at a high speed. The second thing, just going back a bit, was just and again, I shared in the chat, like the whole emphasis on stick on puck, I totally agree with Darryl, is not really enough. It's always come up short for me. And I think in the female game, it too easily gets confused, or it confuses the players that should be their whole focus. Stick on puck. And my emphasis is no. Your number one focus should be body position, then stick on puck. Because the flyby checking is way too prevalent in the female game. They don't generally have the thought process or the backup plan in their head. Hey, what if I miss the puck? What if I don't get the puck? They're too often flying by and totally out of defensive position. So I think it's important to marry those concepts when we're teaching, whether it's just defensive checking or how to separate a player from the puck, how to get the puck back for your team. It's about defensive positioning and stick on puck, not just stick on puck.
I think the way I've described it is, are you containing or are you trying to get the puck? Because if you're trying to get the puck, that's a whole different thing. Like we talk a lot about like disruptions. You're trying to get a bobble, or you're not trying to just contain it to the outside. You're trying to force an opportunity for transition. And not all the time. There are times you're trying to contain, but it comes back to like, what are you trying to do? And if you're trying to force a disruption, or the time comes to force a disruption, then a stick on puck is not going to be enough. You're going to need to be comfortable using the stick on puck. That's just your entry. That's an entry play to get the puck where you want it, to be able to then attack, to get through the hands or cut the player off. Because you need to, if you want the puck, your exit from the play becomes most important. How are you getting out of there? And I think that when I talk about defending, I talk a lot about how are you getting out? If you get the puck, great. But if you don't get the puck, how are you getting out? Because that's an important aspect to redefending, or being able to be on the right side of the puck. So I think that that's another key part of learning to check and be competitive. As much as competitiveness is important, you want to be smart about your competitiveness. And and understand the what is you're really trying to do. I think that that's an important part in teaching.
Darryl, the whole idea, I believe we're on the same page. Historically, we were thinking the same thing here. The vocabulary I use in curriculum is playing defense is knowing when and how to pressure and when and how to contain. And that's what you're talking about. Now, your thinking is when you do pressure, are you aware of what's going to happen and what you're going to do next as you do that? That's what I see in your thinking.
My thinking goes very similar to what you just described. It would be, I'm containing to improve my opportunity to pressure. I'm pressuring to improve my opportunity for transition. And in my pressuring to get transition, I must be cognizant of my exit. How am I getting out? Either getting out with the puck, or if the player makes a play, how am I getting out to like whether I'm getting into a box out or whether I'm looking at a check change, but I don't want to be caught on the wrong side. So as aggressive as I want to be to go get the puck, you're still my check. And so if something bad happens in my exit, I need to be able to have you still controlled. I don't want to be on the wrong side and chasing you back to my net. So I don't think, and this has been a bit of a competitive advantage for me in teaching players to defend in some ways, is to be cognizant of the exit while you're pressuring. So I don't want to contain or pressure. I'm containing to pressure. I'm never not wanting to pressure. I want to pressure all the time. But sometimes it's not smart to just pressure. It's better to contain, control, inch your way in, use the stick properly, control the play. And then when you get close enough or the time is right, now we're going to pressure. But we are trying to pressure every time, and we're trying to get the puck. Our goal is not to defend. We're not trying to defend. We want the puck back. We're only defending long enough to get the puck back. That's it. So we might have to contain to get the pressure, but then when we're pressuring, we're going for the puck. We are trying to create a turnover here. That is your responsibility. And if you fail in that opportunity, which it will happen many, many times, then don't fail defensively in the global part of the play where you overextend yourself, you lose body position, and now you're chasing yourself back to the net. That's how I view defense.
Yeah. You've taken transition to another level because the game is transition.
Correct.
And that's the essence of how we're trying to teach advanced players and advanced coaches to think. Now, before I turn it over to Kim, I don't know if Richard stayed on, but his point on the word hitting, there is no place for it in the vocabulary growing up in hockey. Body checking, the idea of gaining possession takes away from this idea of transition. The mentality of the game and hits and, affecting the male game. Yeah, back in the day, it's an issue. And even today, it still may be an issue. But teaching kids to grow up and coaches with the habit of teaching that physicality to a degree that they don't think at all. And it's one-on-one hockey. It's when you lose a puck, get it back. You don't know what you're going to do with it if you get it. You don't look around. We want to get to the dimension that you're at, Darryl. I appreciate that. So, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback a bit on what Tim was saying about bots, and because I had the pleasure and dismay of playing against her for all the years I was at Dartmouth, and it was effortless and it was easy and it didn't look like she was trying that hard. And in my coaching career, I've only really coached 2 or 3 players who have that, who dominate in that way, who make it look completely effortless. And as they aspire to the national team level, it's actually used against them. And so I'm curious for Tim, since you brought it up, a kid who is dominating, who makes it look effortless, who I think in Canada we prioritize, like, you got to have with the girls, your hair swinging and sweating, and it has to look hard. We prioritize, we value that competitiveness, that it always looks like you're trying hard. That is a Canadian ideal. I think when we talk about our national teams, or when the broadcasters are speaking, it is something we value very deeply in the way that we play hockey. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It is just something that seems to be ingrained. So my question then is, and Darryl might be the best person to answer it, when you do have players who at the level they're at, it is effortless. They can't fake it. You can't ask them to make it look like they're trying harder, but it's actually being used against them in their evaluation. How do you challenge that player? How do you, without putting them up at a higher level, if they're playing in junior and that's the highest level they can be at till they get, to college hockey, how do you help them change that when the game is just too easy at the level they're at?
I think my approach would be to microstat them. And so I would be talking about, when you engage in your one-on-one responsibilities, what is your success rate? And what do you define as part of that success rate? So sometimes the definition is just to disrupt the puck, and sometimes the definition is to come out of there with the puck. So kids who have a very fluid and have a very effortless type of style that get accused of maybe not digging down and competing, there's a handful of instances in every game where it requires them to put their work boots on and they're going to have to, buckle down and get into it. I would isolate those opportunities, but I certainly wouldn't work them off the effortlessness of what it is that they do. That's an identity piece, and I would not be inclined to do that. I'd be more inclined to, hey, listen, I've looked at your game, I've studied it. You have 6 situations every night in which you pretty much have to buckle down. I care about those. The rest of it, try easy, kid. It's a gift. Keep going. But it's not a gift if you're not good in these 6. So these 6, let's recognize them when they happen. And when they happen, you have to come out with positive results. How do we do that? And they might be little ticky-tacky where they go in and it's very cute and it's a little stick lift and they try to get out of there. And that, for some, it's going to work some of the time, but the success rate over time is low when you're ticky-tacky like that. So I would be like, when these situations occur, are you recognizing them? And if you do recognize them, do you know how to really be able to influence those results? The rest of the time, use your gift of being effortless. Hell, all of us who've taught any skating at all, we want kids to try easy. We don't want them to be trying hard. You want to be trying easy. So it's a little counterintuitive to then say, oh, by the way, let's go back to this. I think you just got to pick some battles that are important, quite literally, and really hold them accountable to those. And I think you can get the best of both worlds out of that.
I totally agree, Darryl. And I was writing down sort of my response to Kim, and I literally wrote down exactly what you just said. There are moments in the game where effort is apparent to everybody. If you're F1 on the forecheck, if you're back checking, if you're in a puck battle with somebody, everybody can see the effort you put into those. And Bots, in particular, was not used to putting out effort in those areas because she saved her energy so she could play 40 minutes a game. And it's not a criticism of Bots. It's a criticism of the coaches at Harvard that basically overused her and did her a disservice. So I totally agree with you. It's incumbent on the players, as you intelligently pointed out. There might be 6 or 8 or 10 times a game where we as a team need to see your work boots on. We're not saying you have to change your game. We're not saying this or that. We need that as a team, because most teams, that's who we are as a team. We want to be a hardworking team. And so that I totally agree there. And it's not about how easy it looks or becomes, because thinking players, and Bots was a very intelligent player, and she's a great analyst as well. Thinking players can tend to look more effortless because they're taking the information in and they're trying to think a step ahead. So when this happens, that happens, I'm ready to go over here. But there are instances when, as you said, the work boots have to be on. And that was something that Bots struggled with through most of that year.
Darryl, I want to, related to Jennifer and related to high draft picks coming up, and I'm using Sam Steele as an example. Their shift lengths in junior hockey, and generally in all levels of hockey, Kim, are too long. They overplay those players. They adapt and can play longer shifts. They have the smarts and skills to slow the game down at that level, and they can play and contribute. Now, Sam Steele is a good example because I watched him in the Memorial Cup, and I watched him leading up to it. I'm good friends of one of the skills coaches of the teams. He was double shifted literally the entire game, and never went on the ice. Was on the ice for sometimes 4 minutes in the third period. When they got to overtime, now he's got to go to a league. I don't know that he's going to really ever contribute in the NHL. How long do you learn to play 40-second shifts? In the game, that's what the game is at the Olympic level. And you're reared growing up in the system with much longer shifts and entitled ice time. And now all of a sudden you're trying to find a role and a place on a team. So Darryl, any points on that?
Well, I'm of the opinion that Sam Steele is an NHL player, and his desire to be an impact NHL player. He's been an impact player his whole life. He'll figure it out. At some point, he'll find a way. He'll want to play. He'll want to be an impact player, and he'll find his way.
Coaching now that's probably recognized the best skills coach in the world.
Yeah.
Darryl Belfry.
Hey, Tom, maybe turn your mic off if you're chatting with somebody. Thanks. Go ahead, Darryl. Sorry.
So I think that there's a factor of that. The one thing that's interesting as we're talking about, what can we do with young coaches? How can we handle players who are elite players on our team, and how can we prepare them perhaps to be better in these situations, is to learn the effect that their shift can have on the next shift. So what responsibility do you have as a player for the people coming on after you? One of the things that drives me crazy, and you see this all the time, is like, player comes on the ice, they do, there's a couple of chances in both ends. They're an elite player. They finally get some traction in the offensive zone. There's a couple of shots that happen, then they lose the puck, and the other team breaks out. So what do? They just go to the bench, and the other team, the other line has to go on now, chasing a rush back into the defensive zone, and they're going to have to start in the defensive zone. Meanwhile, we had full control in the offensive zone. And you see this now happening more and more at a lot of levels, where there's a value of the possession change. People are valuing the possession change. So if I got a kid who's better than everybody in the league, he's just an elite player growing up, this could be a situation, an opportunity from a coaching perspective to get him to learn how, hey, listen, like, you can also stack the deck in the favor of the next group, and you have a responsibility to create possession changes. So it's not good enough that you're generating these chances. You now have to get control of the puck, and you have to initiate a change while we still have the puck. That's a way of transferring the value that that player has on their shifts as it relates to the impact on the rest of the team, which may turn shorten their shifts, or if it doesn't shorten their shift, it at least there's an impression that I'm going to do something to improve the situation or leave the ice in a better place than when I got it by getting you set up in the offensive zone with possession of the puck, which in my mind, that's the best change. The best change is not a dump and change. That doesn't help me at all. The responsibility of you is to get the puck in the offensive zone and initiate a change while we still have the puck. So when our next line comes out here, you have given them an opportunity against maybe a line that's now a little bit tired. And now our next line comes out fresh and they have a great opportunity to be able to do it. I don't think we talk enough about what your shift, the relationship between your shift and the next guy's shift and what impact that has. We don't talk enough about that. And so a lot of times you'll see that shift I was talking about. Hey, we've
Who
been
has
out here for 50
who has
seconds.
control of that? Who has control of that?
I think the coach has control of that.
Yeah, that's precisely it. And I'm saying if Sam Steele, and I look at all the superstar players, and you've got a couple on your team, if they don't make good judgments in terms of what you're saying, and you know as a coach they could stay out there half tired and probably score for you. But that balance between how long is too long and managing your ice and buying into the importance of the team first, that's going to win the Stanley Cup.
But if my player is out there, and let's say it's like a bantam player, and he's clearly one of the better players in the league. If he's extending his shift in an effort to maintain puck control to give our team a possession change, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
If he's extending his shift in an effort to see that maybe possibly I might get another personal scoring chance, maybe I'm not as good with that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not quite team.
No, I get
That's
what you're
not
saying.
quite
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe as me as a coach, I could take a look at all of his changes, go through all of his changes and say, you tell me, I'm just going to show you these changes. You tell me on any of these changes when our team is in a better position, the next line is in a better position because you were on the ice. You show me. And I guarantee you, with a lot of kids, like in a bantam age group, you're going to see a lot of changes on the fly that the next line coming out is in a worse position
yes.
because that line was on the ice. They dump it and change. Well, we had full possession of the puck, and now they have a free breakout. So now I gotta jump on the ice, and I'm in a neutral zone forecheck, absorbing a rush, or like in the play you overextended your shift, so now you're in the defensive zone, you ice it. And now you go, well, now I got to take a defensive zone face-off. Or worse, you're in the offensive zone. You overextend your shift. They break out. You're certainly not interested in back-checking at that point. So now we're back-checking, and you're like, oh, the hell with that. Like, that's somebody else's problem. So now you do a change on the way back, and now I got to go on the ice, and I'm taking the other team's already in the zone. I think if you sat down with a kid who really wants to play, and you said, hey, listen, let's talk about some of these changes. We're talking about 5 or 6 changes in a hockey game that he could directly impact.
Tim
You're telling me I'm not going to try to do something like that? I think that would be a cool project for a kid to go through.
Tim mentioned, you're talking bantams. I see it in the NHL. The changes are awful. Yeah. The scoring chances that are more dangerous scoring chances are still occurring off changes. And the inability to be aware of that. And I don't think it's done selfishly. It's done carelessly, like they're just not cognizant of the importance of that time and space in that moment situation. So, Kim, you've had your hand up a while here, so.
Well, I just wonder how much, we in video sessions, as Darryl, mentioned, everyone gets their video cut now, right? And you get a message with all your shifts, and it's just your shifts. It's no one else's shifts. And I've always had this visceral reaction to that idea of I didn't like it. And now that Darryl's brought up this idea, maybe that was subconsciously in there, right? It's, players are watching themselves, however many shifts they get in a game, and they're not seeing, the 30 seconds that comes after that. And I think that, that my shift mentality, as opposed to watching the whole period or watching 5 or 10 minutes of the period, is filtering down into minor hockey. There's so many different services you can use now. When it used to be just Stiva or some very dedicated coach cutting all your shifts for you, now there's so many services that do this for you. So I think it's incumbent on the coaches to maybe not always use those technologies in that way, where it's just an isolated shift, because then you're never going to solve this problem if they're only ever watching themselves and they're never, watching the full game. I could see in female hockey this having a really big impact, because we all know they don't watch enough of full games already. So if you're isolating it even further into where it's just them, I think that would go against what Darryl just said about, that responsibility to the rest of your team. So it's interesting how the technology can help you or hurt you, but I could see that having a harmful effect on the team play in isolation.
So I totally agree, Kim. The quick response or quick thought there would be, because let's be realistic, you're not going to get. It's tough enough to get your players to watch their shifts, let alone watch the whole game. But sort of to your point, if you made it sort of routine, so if you sit down to watch your shifts, and the way I, as a coach, edit those shifts is you get your shift plus 12 seconds or something. And one of the things you're going to be watching for is Darryl's point. What are you leaving the next line? Are you leaving the next line a defending situation, an offensive situation? What are you leaving? That's as Darryl points out, it's an important part of the evaluation. As I mentioned, it drives me to distraction how often you see it in the NHL games. And the Flames, I'm going to say, you could go back, and if they were better at changing this year, they might be in the playoffs as we speak. They've given up so many goals with just horrendous changes, from the overextension of shifts, to sniffing for that extra goal, or just the inability to manage their time effectively on the ice. It's a big thing, and it was one of the first things we attacked with the Danish team. Is the effort level was obviously number one, but a big part of that is shift length and managing your ice properly. And Darryl, I love your term, and we're going to use it, is your responsibility to the next shift. Just like as a puck carrier, your prime responsibility, in Wally's old words, is to keep the play going for your team, make a good decision so you can keep the puck. As a group, your unit of 5 on the ice is responsible for kind of keeping the play going for us as a team in that way. So I love that terminology. Definitely going to steal it and use it, because I think it's really effective. Instead of just talking about, hey, we got to make good changes, it gives some ownership for the players. It encourages them to take ownership. I want to leave whoever's coming after me a good situation. Really like it.
So what about you take that same kid, and I'm talking about some bantam kid who's trying to figure all this out, and you pull him in, and you have six line changes that happened on the fly, in which he was coming on the ice, he or she was coming on the ice, and say, let's take a look at these shifts. And there's going to be the same problems that he's encountered or she's encountering when they're going on this. So I have 12 of these little line change examples from the game before, 6 of them in which they're coming on the ice, and 6 of them in which you're leaving the ice. And the only grading I'm trying to look at is, what is the conditions of the ice here when you're getting it, and what are the conditions when you leave? And we all talk about culture. We talk about culture till it's of nausea. I think that this is a culture piece for your team. How are you leaving the ice? here you are, you're a skilled player. You're one of the best players in the league. How nice would it be when you come on the ice that you're given the puck? Your group just gives you the puck, and now you can start on offense. How come you have to go off of, defensive zone faceoffs? We're dumping and changing. Now you got to go get the puck back. How nice would it be for you to come on the ice and your team gives you the puck and off you go? That would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, it'd be really nice. Yeah, well, what about on the way back now? Let's watch the 6 on the way back when you're leaving the ice. It might be a situation here, son, where you give or you get what you give. If you're not given anything here, which I'm watching you exit the ice, you're not given some really good conditions. Maybe if you started giving some conditions, now you're getting conditions. Culturally, our team is interested in what's going on with how I'm getting the ice and how I'm leaving it. I don't know if there's many more powerful ways to talk about improving my shift or what I'm actually doing on my shift and impact in the game than something like that. I think it's a cool concept to discuss with your team.
I totally agree. To use Morris brought it to us, but Pat Quinn's verbiage, that definitely should be part of who we are and what we do as a team, getting directly to the culture piece. Totally agree.
Wally, your mic.
Still off, Wally. You're still off.
I just wanted to give you a drill to teach that. CIS did it with a number of coaches that I work with, and it relates to this topic. And it's a simple drill. And I did it with the pros when I ran conditioning camps back in the day that Tim skated with us. We would scrimmage 2 versus 2 with 20-second shifts. The condition was you had to change fast. So that meant your feet have to be moving with a 20-second shift. It's ridiculously short. And as a coach, you could extend it if there was an offensive opportunity existing or a breakaway happening. But you blew the whistle, passed it to your goalie, and you had to sprint off and sprint on. If there was any gliding, it was wall time for everybody. And you talked about, why are we doing this? Why is it important? And you relate it to the game. And they get the message. The drill itself, it replaces the old-fashioned conditioning skate of our time, 20-second balls out scrimmage, fast, quick changes, and the habit of respecting the importance of changes was reinforced by that. And most of the coaches I brought it up with adapted that. It became a part of their culture and their approach to coaching the game at that level. So, Matt, welcome back. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry for that. We've got our pool out back is actually just getting opened up today, and I'm the only one here, and they were knocking on the door, so I apologize for having to run. And if it was covered, then I apologize. But when I was gone, but I love the points, Darryl. I love the reframing of it, right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about trying to develop habits in players, right? And I'm always, as a coach, trying to find ways to motivate players, to develop good habits, keep those good habits. And a big one for me that I've always found successful is if you could find some way to reframe the thought process so that they are feeling that responsibility towards their teammates, which is what you're talking about. I find that those are often some of the greatest motivators when you've created a situation where they don't want to let their teammates down, and that just sort of floods into everything they're doing after that. So that hey, your shift adds responsibility, towards your teammates. Then you can get into possession tactics. You can get into smart changes, your shift length, your face-off location, as you talk about, just general momentum of your shift and effort, and then just the general effort and skating to the bench. These are all individual habits, but you can put them all into that same pile and say these are areas that are your responsibility for your teammates. And I think that's an excellent way to reframe it. And I guarantee you I'm going to be using that. And I like the idea about the culture as well, because I think you can do an off-ice team building exercise where you have, group A and group B. And I'm just sort of thinking of this on the fly, but they're doing a task. And if group A doesn't do it satisfactory in a way that you want them to, then it's going to affect team B. And then you ask team B, how did that feel, right? How did that make you feel that when team A left you with this situation? And then you can bring it back to, okay, that's what it's like when they leave you with a bad shift as well, right? So I think that's an excellent way to reframe that.
I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at this, and we come at it, or at least I'm coming at it from more of a player development perspective of trying to, get this player to respect the shifts and have an understanding of, how they can utilize their time. And the way I look at it with an elite player who's overstaying their shifts, and the longer the shift goes on, the more hope they play with. And I hope I get a bounce here. I hope that there's a rebound. I hope that the puck stays in. And I try to tell people, top players, as much. Hope is just not a strategy. We don't play with hope. We don't play with hope. We are playing with a purpose. And in order to play with, and if you do those purposes consistently, eventually the bounce that you are hoping to get will just happen for you. And so trying to teach kids to not play with hope, I think, is an important aspect. And I think that the younger elite players are used to playing with that. If I just wish that don't give me a pass. I'm the fastest player on the ice. Just throw it out in the neutral zone. I'll go get it and go get a breakaway. Like, that's a hope play. And the older you get, the more hope that needs to be attached to that play in order for you to get a breakaway. And so I think what I try to do as piggyback to just this concept, whenever I'm thinking about it from a player development perspective, I'm looking at it from the idea of what's your responsibility here, and how can you leverage your talent to improve others, which, if you're truly great, that's what you're going to have an effect on. You're not truly great until other people get better because of you. That's you can lead the league in points, you can score the most goals, but if other people are not noticeably improving because of you, you're not truly great. And you tell that to a kid who is trying to be great, and attitudes change quickly.
It's kind of interesting, Darryl, that you got into the hope thing. I was just as a sidebar, I'm reading this really interesting book now. I told Wally about it. It's called The Biggest Bluff. It's about a clinical psychologist who's trained in decision making, who decides she wants to learn how to play poker. She gets some of the best poker players in the world to teach her. It's a very interesting book. And I just read the section last night that her very experienced, learned poker coach is saying, hope is not part of poker. Hope is, your words exactly, hope is not a strategy. You've got to get beyond that. You can't just sit there. So I'm kind of chuckling as you said that. And then just to add on quickly to the whole shift management and good change mentality, just something that I've done with my teams for a lot of years is whenever we're playing small area games of any description, when we change, if there's a whistle for a change, then when we change, the change has to happen glove to glove. So you can't saunter off, you can't drift off. Well, you can, but it's a great opportunity to make the point that if you choose to saunter off or drift off or change at the wrong time, you're putting your team at a disadvantage. So we build it into all of our small area games that if there's a whistle to change, it's got to be hustle off, touch gloves, 1-for-1 in order to make the change, just like you would in a game. So we kind of build in the habit that way.
Changing is a shape. It's a game shape, a competitive advantage, game shape. Changing is a shape. And, I think the more they keep that in mind, the better it is. Because a lot of players don't think that. They're like, okay, I'm getting off. I'll put the puck 200 feet down and I've done my job. And I think redefining what a good change is. I don't know the definition of getting the red line and dumping it in. That's not a good change for me. I don't like that. That for me is several rungs down of a good change. That's not the optimal change. And I think redefining that for your players to change that mindset, I think, is a good one.
And sorry, Kim, if I could quickly interject. We also have this drill with the Danish team. Peter, our head coach, loves to use it without getting into all the details, but it's kind of on that point exactly, Darryl. He calls it ice cats. And it's a random situation where the puck carrier could have support or may not have support, but your job is to figure out if you do have support, and if you don't have support going into the offensive zone, your job is kind of like on a change situation, hold on to the puck, protect the puck, look for an opportunity to get support, and if you need to, then obviously change. So he calls it ice cats, and it's a pretty cool drill to sort of build in that habit that, dump and change is not optimal. If you have to dump, do the flyby thing to stall the opposition at least. All those things are pertinent, of course. Sorry, Kim, I stole some time from you.
I think I get enough time on these, so it's fine. But, I was just going to share, I don't know if I stole the idea from Wally. Wally might have given it to me. I think I steal a lot from Wally of the 20-second shifts. I started doing that drill with all the teams I worked with this year in September because we had no idea if we were going to be playing 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. Turns out we played 0 games. But when we went into lockdown, we had no idea whether we'd be playing 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 when it started off. So my coaches and I were thinking, how are we going to teach this, like in terms of game flow and gameplay, because the girls just don't have that experience of playing that type of hockey in a full ice scenario. So we started doing 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 full ice with the 20-second whistle. And you had to change every 20 seconds. That was the rule. And it was fascinating to watch how the girls did it, because a perfect example of asking, not telling. That was the only rule. And they're like, what if this? I said, just play. So, of course, you guys can all predict what happened. They changed in order. So if Matt went on first, right, he was the first one to come off, irrespective of where I don't know how they remembered, to be honest with you. The 5 of them were in order on the bench, and then they went on the ice, and then they changed in order. So no one took a longer shift. No one stayed on long, and they were giving up 2-on-0s, and they were getting 3-on-0s. And it was fascinating because like all the rules of normal gameplay went out the window. And we're talking, I did this with the junior kids all the way down to, the U11s, but they all of a sudden like forgot everything they knew about hockey and just started changing in order. And then we'd stop it and say, and we did it, every practice we would, sort of do this drill at the end to, it was a conditioning drill, because if they were playing 3-on-3 full ice, we were going to be in trouble having them, never done that before. But it was really fascinating to stop the play and say, okay, I think I've figured out how you guys are changing. Like, how did you decide on that strategy, or how did that come to pass? And, we finally were able, it was a great gateway to start talking about advantages and, when to, move the puck or keep the puck. And so I think that maybe at the younger levels, lower levels, that might be a good way to segue into what Darryl's talking about, to introduce it in that way, as opposed to, I think if I took it to a U11 and said, leave the ice better than you found it, and started at that sort of higher level concept, that might be challenging, but it might be a fun drill to start with. But I mean, none of you would be shocked that Coach the girls that this is how they decided to change. But even me, who I've only ever coached girls, I was shocked at how they did it. And they're like, oh, we just did it in order because that's like the nice way to do it. Like, oh my God, Lord help me.
The one way to introduce something like that would be in your, games that you play. You could have a stipulation for every game that you play that said you cannot change unless your team has full control of the puck. And so creates an onus on the team then to try to first get control of the puck and then start initiating their changes. And then what do you do? So maybe it might be a situation where you have to leave the offensive zone. It's better for you to leave the offensive zone, backpedal out, get the passes going on a regroup, a long regroup, and then that starts the changes. And then once everybody's on, then now we get going. So I think that, depending on how you set up your games, there might be, I'm pretty sure you could think of 2 or 3 games in which this type of a constraint would fit nicely into that game where you're just like, you can't change unless your team has full control. And then you could have that go multiple games in a row and then see what happens. Yes, exactly. The overtime in the NHL, even 4-on-4 is 4-on-4 in the NHL. You don't want to be giving up that puck. You might not get it back. 3-on-3, if you give up the puck, probably not getting it back. And so, trying to come up with those ways that's a way of introducing it in your games. You put a constraints, maybe in your drills. You have certain drills that would lend itself well to, we're not changing until you get the puck and you make successful plays. Those are ways to kind of inadvertently start building the process. And then over time, you watch those games play out, you start to see that they have a handle on it. Well, then now you're ready to take it to another level of execution. Maybe it's a full ice thing, a game at the end where it's a 4-on-4 and they have to execute their change. And then it's not far departure to go from a 4-on-4 full ice to 5-on-5, finding your way into a possession change.
Totally agree, Darryl. And I was just thinking, I think it really is kind of that simple. Play some 3-on-3 cross ice games or 4-on-4 sort of 3/4 ice. And the only 2 stipulations are, as you suggest, number one, you change on your own. You're aiming at 25, 30 seconds. You change on your own. You can only change when your team has full possession of the puck. And I might add, because players always do this too, full possession in the defensive zone under pressure, probably not a good time to change. So maybe there's some subtlety beyond simple possession, but I think it's that simple to help get that ball rolling. Totally agree.
Just anything you can do to create an awareness. Then you think of, I know I have this clock going on in my head where I know I'm overstaying my shift. Does that impact the assertiveness that I now have to get possession of the puck so that we can change? That there's a lot of benefits to, if we're not going to change until we have full possession of the puck, and I know that my shift is extending, well, now I'm really going to try to find my way into that change and get that puck back. So that's a really cool side benefit to that. Now I'm a little later in the shift. I'm more tired. And now I really have to go get this puck because I can't get off unless we get it. So it's a really interesting side benefit. If we talk to kind of bring the whole conversation full circle about competitiveness, there's a way of inadvertently adding competitiveness because you're now at a competitive disadvantage to have to try to find your way into a change.
Darryl, I would have said years ago that this is almost overcoaching. Like, how much can we get across? And the old school players don't want to be told too much. They can be coached, but you sort of have to coach around them. And Tim, the theory of my friend who's written the book on the art of coaching is doing the right stuff, the right amount, the right time, and taking this kind of a simple drill, which I had only just balls out conditioning was the purpose, with the consciousness of its importance of the game, having fun, playing hard, and that little bit of respect. That was enough for me. But everything you've added on now, today's generation of coaching and players, I believe it would be really useful. But how can coaches, average coaches, even advanced coaches that might not be at the level they begin to take that kind of a concept and apply it? The head coaches you're working with, particularly, that's pretty advanced.
It's just a simple idea of experimenting with your group, saving 10 minutes at the end of practice and building it as a game. Say, instead of goals scored as your way in which you're saying that you're going to, the way in which you're compiling points for the game, it could be possession changes is what your goal is. I think that there's, in all of these things, it's not a, okay, now we're all in and we're doing it only this way and this is how we're doing it. It's, hey, here's an interesting concept. Let's mess around with it. And I think as a inexperienced coach that's just trying to find their way, taking 10 minutes at the end of a practice and saying, hey, here's a constraint-based game that I can mess around with and just try something different. I'm going to throw it out there and see how it's received. And then afterwards you say to the kids, hey, what did you think was hard? What did you think was easy? Did you like it? How could we make it better? And then now you can get some ownership on it. And maybe they might come up with some ideas that are better than yours. So now you throw them in there and now you're good. You don't care how it gets done. You're just messing around with it. And I think that sometimes as coaches, as particularly, the better the coach I became, the more I took a lot more risks with experimentation. The weaker the coach that I was and the more inexperienced I was, the more I felt like I needed a dialed in plan that had every nuance taken care of. And the more I got experience, the more I was able to ad lib. So with an inexperienced coach, you're trying to find opportunities where they can gradually dip their toe in some ad libbing stuff. And these types of concepts are pretty interesting to dive into. And they're fairly safe. I mean, who doesn't want to play a game? They want to play games, just change the rules a little bit and the constraints on it and see what happens. See what happens. What do you got to lose?
Yeah, I totally agree. And Wally, I don't think it's really what we're talking about is any different than your 2-on-2 20-second shift game. It's no different than that. It's a pretty simple thing, and I don't think it gets into the overcoaching area in any way, shape, or form. It's a simple mental concept, like Darryl's thought about having the clock running in your head is always something that the good players are acutely aware of, and the maybe a little bit more selfish players are a little less aware of. And it's just that mentality that good changes are good for the team, and how do we make them? And I love Darryl's idea again about, hey, play the 4-on-4 with those two constraints. Like you got to change on possession, you got to change on your own. There's no clock telling you when to change. You got to figure it out. And then having the discussion, hey, how was it? Was it hard? Was it easy? How can we do it better? Like that's what we're all about.
No, I agree with you, Tim. I'm thinking of minor hockey coaches that are reluctant to even play small area games because they just want to do flow drills, and we're fighting the battle at Darryl. They're avoiding teams that are creating rogue teams and leagues for whole ice hockey because they don't want to play small ice hockey. and they're short shifting the best players, and that's the minor hockey dilemma in the game today that I'm primarily dealing with. So when I'm talking about this kind of a concept, our audience here gets it. Like I totally understand the value of it, but we're trying to get coaches to just accept the fact that the game teaches, and Tom Malloy is on. Nobody has as many small area games on his website in the world. And he's been around the world with European coaches, Russian coaches, you name it. And the concept is let the game teach. And adding that kind of thinking to the game brings in a tactical purpose. And I think it's brilliant. But at the same hand, we always have to be cognizant of Kim's working with house league people that are coming into hockey, just beginning hockey, beginning coaches, moving up, going to get to the competitive level. And it's going to be a new experience for her. Working now as a mentor coach in an association with where what we're talking about is something that you have to weigh. What do you do and when do you do it? At what age? And
I think it's like when you get these coaches and the more inexperienced they are, like as you're mentoring them or we have people around them that are trying to help them. I mean, sometimes I think it's as simple as just like when you had your practices last week, you did it a certain way. Next week, can you add one thing that's different than what you have been doing previously? Do that for a couple of weeks. Get a sense of it. Once you get that, now add another one. So now the coach is there for, call it 6 months. He's coaching this team for 6 months. He's now added at the end of the year 12 new things that he would never have done previously because he did 2 a month over the course of the time. He added something different to his structure. Could be figured out an assembly line for the first time. He's a house league coach with young kids, and he's like, okay, I want to get this drill to automate so that I don't have to blow the whistle all the time. So I'm going to run some kind of an assembly line. Very simple, right? But that's simple for me, but not very simple for someone who's trying for the first time. Okay, try your hand at an assembly line. Okay, try your hand in a small area game with a constraint, not just a straight 3-on-3 with no constraints. Add a constraint. Just one constraint, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter what it is. Just something new. Then the next week, okay, can you do a drill that the kids come from the middle, like they come, all the players are on the boards in the neutral zone. And so now you're doing a slide in. So everyone's got to slide in, and then they do their thing, and they slide out, and the next group slides in. Maybe we can try that. You know, all the different drill formats is how you get at these inexperienced coaches, because the more inexperienced they are, they're going to kind of they're going to see what works and the local people that are doing what they do, and they're going to just stick to that. That's how we got stuck with, you know, we get on the ice, we do the 5 circles, and then we do the 5 circles with a puck, and then we do the, you know, the this and the that, and at the end, and then there's like this coach is doing one practice plan the whole year because they're comfortable there. They're just not encouraged to try different things. And the more inexperienced you are, the more likely you're going to get, well, this worked last week, so I'm going to do it again this week. And the idea is to try to gradually evolve them with just one idea, one new way of doing things. It's a good way of trying to get that going.
Thanks very much, Darryl. Really appreciate that.
I think I'm just going to add something to that because I think you're right. You have to give, you know, coaches creative control of those things. You can't just come in and dictate, say you're going to run practice A and B and this is the curriculum. And it's interesting because I think coaches often at the level I'm coaching at are too creative and they don't stick with it long enough. And I see that a lot in our competitive coaches is that they have a new practice plan every single time they go on the ice, and there's no opportunity for the players to become comfortable, become masters of the drill. I always laugh when we were at Dartmouth, you know, we had Tuesday practice. Tuesday practice was always the same drills. They had different constraints. But when you showed up on Tuesday, you knew what practice was going to look like for the most part, right? You're going to do center circuit drills, you're going to do this sort of thing, and the skills within them changed to your point, right? It was the same drill but slightly different skill or focus. I do think though at the association level, it's important to have shared principles or a shared game model that can filter up and down the whole organization. So there is a for us, to use an alliteration, the Wildcat way of playing. And this is something that I'm going to be establishing come the fall. So there's going to be, physicality will be one of our key principles. And if a house league coach understands that and the junior team coach understands that, certainly they're going to be teaching them in different ways. But we know for our Wildcat players at all levels, there are 3 or 4 key principles that we need to consistently implement. So that I think that gives, to your point, the more introductory coaches kind of like, okay, I just have to hit these 4 targets. I got to make sure I have a physicality drill. And it keeps, my junior coach is a little more honest to say, they can't just run off on a tangent and completely disregard our game model or our key principles. So I think that, I hope that, I don't know that, I hope that that's a pretty good recipe for success, because I think the biggest challenge we face is consistency as players move up through the levels and go through the teams. If you're lucky enough to get a fantastic coach at Bantam, and then the midget coach just is kind of old school and does things the old way, that's a missed opportunity. There's not enough connectivity, throughout the levels. So, I think that in addition with those, like you said, seeding it a little bit with some creativity and not expecting them to be skills instructors like you and I. Most hockey coaches are not skills instructors, and I think that's where they need the most help.
Most hockey coaches are not they're not skill instructors, they're not coaches.
Right.
They're people that are regular people, and they're coming in trying to just, get involved. And so I think your point's a good one. What I'm trying to say is that once you find a way of, you found one way to teach something, every coach, the more inexperienced you are, the less access you have to drills. That's the first question is, oh my God, what's the drill? Give me a drill. Give me a drill. And so it's the experimenting inside of that drill. So you found a way to teach, physicality for, some Adam age players, rep players or whatever. Great. Found one way. Maybe in a couple weeks, maybe you can find another way to stick with physicality, but maybe there's a different way to set it up. Maybe there's a different way to organize and experiment that way. So like you say, they don't go completely rogue, but at the same time that they're growing. They're not going to grow unless they start messing around with things. And I think that's it. And too many organizations, it's really the luck of the draw of the age group that you're in, and you got to hope that there's the good coach is still there when you get there. And you try to eliminate that luck by creating these situations where you can develop the coach and you're still touching those key points. So it's just trying to, mentorship in part is creating an opportunity for a coach, no different than a player, to get on the fringes of their ability. Well, your mic. I'm gonna go at 1.
Okay.
Mike.
Kim, physicality as a choice of words, I just want, when I hear it and I think of your situation, guys who maybe never coached hockey, coaching girls, and how they would interpret it in terms of accomplishing being more competitive, which is the issue with female players, getting to the college level of learning to understand how to be that way. So I don't know whether I would change the word and whether competitive means anything or physicality has to be interpreted. It's no different than Richard Bergeson's point about the statistic of hitting in minor hockey. It completely creates the wrong mindset to play the game the way it needs to be played and is being played. It literally hitting, maybe now in the short schedule in the playoffs, there's more hitting going on. but there's more good checking that needs to go on. There's that line between hitting, body checking, and checking, and they're discovering it there. So good luck with that, Kim. And
Well, it's interesting, Wally, because I didn't come up with that. I actually did with our all our AA coaches. I asked them to come up with our game model and our principles. I said, here's the idea. I sent them kind of a one pager of here's what I want, like here's what we're looking for to create for the Wildcats. And every single one of them came back with physicality. And I actually didn't have it on my list. So that's interesting to me. Like maybe I'm coaching it well at junior, and so I didn't think of it as a priority, right? But I do agree. There maybe I think also the strength and conditioning coach in me sees physicality as something very different and not always the hitting. Like there's a way to use your body, like a physicality of yourself. So, that's how I received that word, under my own experiences. But I totally hear what you guys are saying. If it's a less experienced coach or someone who doesn't have the background I have, they might see that physicality as, an aggressiveness. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think we're at the opposite spectrum of that. So a little bit of, sandpaper might actually be okay. And then we can find somewhere in the middle. But I didn't even have it on my radar. And every single one of our 5 AA coaches was adamant that physicality in some way needs to be a part of our key principles. So it was really fascinating I'm not dictating from on high here and telling them these are the key principles. And they came up with ones quite a bit different than what I had. And it's their teams. I'm not coaching. So
no, you're influencing the game. And having scouted in the women's game for many years, and the biggest thing I see is hockey sense. Being smart in whatever you do, which the female game had naturally built into it because of the absence of body checking. And I don't see our team game at the highest level, the national team level, getting any better at that. They are trying to be physical. They're not smart at all. And so the reflection of how they're going to be coached coming up the ladder, we may be contributing to the way the game is played at that level, but I would like to think the big picture of development and where the game is going, we do need them to be competitive. And Tim did type in the word competitiveness and understanding the difference between it and physicality. It's got more to do with Darryl's approach and thinking about everything you're doing and why you're doing it. And girls in particular will understand that. And men coaching it, I worry about that. And I think there's a lot to be learned by us as coaches with this group, let alone people who have never coached, that are beginning the game, beginning coaching, going to coach the way they've coached the guys' game. So just a little bit of a flag. Tim, go ahead.
I got to jump off, guys. I'll talk to you guys another time. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Darryl. Okay.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it, as always.
Thank you. Your mic, Tim.
Sorry,
Good.
thanks, Wally. Kim, I was going to say that I would not be surprised if you had if you drilled down all those coaches that chose the word physicality, what they mean is competitiveness. Because like we're talking in the female game generally, especially at the younger ages, there's a need to teach that, like we talked about earlier, to teach that competitiveness. And I'm guessing that's what they really mean, and that's what they're after. And again, I totally agree that using the word competitiveness or compete would be more instructive and more useful than using the word physicality. So just some thoughts there. And I do have to jump off, guys. Awesome today. Good to have Darryl on. And Rick, you're quiet as a church mouse, and I'll be looking in the looking back on Wally's notes for Kim's 3 other principles other than physicality. But anyway, I got to jump off. Thanks for that, Rick. See you guys.
Okay.
So it's a good question, Rick. And so I don't know that we've, to the point that you guys are making, and again, it's really been great learning for me to not dictate from on high and work with these coaches, because the things they picked are very like skill oriented, individual player oriented. So when they spoke about physicality, it was like in that one-on-one battle against the wall or that one-on-one battle in front of the net, the absence of the ability to use your body effectively in that situation. They were talking about things, you know, in a very isolated one-on-one way, as opposed to kind of like Wally alluded to, that hockey sense, hockey IQ. So again, I am glad I didn't give them examples, and I'm glad I didn't, you know, cause the halo effect of me suggesting principles and then having them follow along. Because I think I would not have learned as much about them and maybe what their priorities are as I did in doing it this way, right? In doing it this way, I learned that they are looking at the game in a different way than I am. And again, this was only our AA, so U21 down to U11, right? So I learned a lot just by asking this one question: is what would your key principles be? And so I did it similar to how Wally would do the mission statement exercise, right? Is I kind of introduced it, they gave me a lot of information, and then we tried to whittle it down. So I guess version 1 that went back to them, we really only agreed upon 3 so far, right? And so one was the physicality piece. And again, it may change words, but that's, think of it when I say it in terms of that one-on-one ability to be physical. Pace, being able to dictate the pace. So girls hockey is always played, I think it's a speeded up game. It's not a slow it down game. Girls are, for whatever reason, think that they constantly have to, you know, run a 2-1-2 go game. So dictating the pace of the game. One that I think we're not sure on yet would be poise as it relates to possession, right? So I think, you know, when you use that word of poise, I think it says a lot about the way you choose to play the game. You're not going to just fire it away when you're under pressure. So to me, poise and possession are in the same wheelhouse. I'm not sure one is necessarily better than the other, but I personally really love the word poise, right? You're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You know, the one that I think, you know, is missing there is, you know, the right place, right time side of it. You know, obviously we're trying to stay in the P word zone here. You know, is the word place the right kind of word, you know, for our coaches to get them to understand, you know, the next play, you know, where's the open space. You know, when I thought of them myself, support and space were 2 of mine, and they were almost my, like, there's no question about it, but they didn't bring them up in that way, right? They didn't bring them up with those words. So, you know, again, I'm trying to find, in my first time ever doing this, how much am I going to let them drive the bus? How much am I going to take, you know, what they said and, you know, rework it in a way that I think, you know, feels a little better to me. You know, I'm fortunate. Our junior coach is a former youth sports coach. Our midget AA coach has played for me since high school and has coached with me since she graduated from Ryerson. Our U11 AA coach is an old guy who's coached forever and probably knows more than the rest of us. Our U15 coach is a professional hockey instructor like me. And so we have a very sort of, you know, these are not, for lack of a better term, just some dad who's decided or who's coached his daughter up all the way and she just happens to be a superstar in AA. So I do take a lot of value in what they're saying. But I think what's missing right now is that idea of support and space, and what is the word that conveys that? And is it only really applicable for these high performance programs? You know, are we really worried about that at U9 and U11 when we have so much basic skill to still teach them? So it's really instructive, but I think there's still a version 2 that needs to happen. Another conversation, another working session that dials it in. We didn't get there in the hour we spent on it so far. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about maybe how much control you guys think I should take of the situation and sort of dictating it, or how much I allow them to drive the bus, because again, it's their team.
Kim, I got a point here, and I'm glad Tom is still on. And I relate this story. Everything you're saying that you want your principals, you don't have to teach or coach. The game will teach it. And letting them play games is going to be better than coaching. Small area, figure it out, ask questions, have fun. And I've told this story a number of times. My first year of coaching as a ex-national team player, coaching 3 sports in high school, running a hockey school for 3 or 4 years. I was asked to take a AA Bantam team, and I inherited the 2 top Pee Wee teams in the city from our area of the city. They played in the finals the year before, so I had the best Bantams literally in the province. And I was at 4th place in November. And I talked to the coach of the previous year, who was a dad. He said, I said, what did you do? I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do. Planning practice. They work hard. They do everything I want. And he said, Wally, I don't know anything about hockey, so I just had games. I think we had 50 scheduled games. I might have had 6 indoor practices. And we played a lot of outdoor shinny on some of the open spaces in Calgary that they're close to where the kids live. They won the city champion. Instead of quitting, which I was thinking of doing, I talked to him. So I was smart enough to try to get help and find out from a guy who knew it all. And he was able to get those kind of results, develop those kind of skills and hockey sense. And I let them play more games. 3/4 of the practice became more game oriented. I just began to let them enjoy it and pointed out like he did, pat him on the back. And we ended up winning the cities and winning the provincials. But had I not had that experience, as much as we know about the game and how to teach it and break it down, not every coach does. So if they play games and apply them, throw in the odd special rules and have a lot of fun, like Tom said, the game's going to teach. So Tom, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just a real good example of that is I was a head coach of the under-17 team for the Red Bulls in Holberg, and we had a whole bunch of superstars from their towns, right? And I had like 5 Finnish kids and a Hungarian kid and all that sort of thing, but the kids would not pass the puck, and so this Jerry Weimer was my assistant coach, and I got a story about him. We just decided we were going to warm up the goalie, and the 2 of us played with the kids and everybody on the ice. And we played like 45 minutes straight of shinny with the rule that you had to make a pass in every zone. So if I got a pass in my zone at the red line, I couldn't just go in. That wasn't good enough. I had to make a pass. So what that did is it made my teammates, jump up and become available and all this. And we, we were winning 80% of our games. We started winning games by 5 and 10 goals. We played a Canadian sports school. We were under 17. Of course, they got under 19 kids. And we beat them 12-3. And we were just snapping the puck around. And that's all we did for the last month of the season. It was the most effective thing I've ever done coaching. And just the thing about Jerry, he's 57, and I just got informed 2 nights ago he didn't wake up. And I guess he must have had a heart attack or something happened. So, but he was a great guy, big, huge guy, about 6'4", and played for Salzburg, and he was also a cop. But that's all we did. We just played with the kids, and it was really, really effective. And they were pretty skilled already. But
Jordan,
so, for me,
I've got a new computer here. Can you hear me?
yes,
yeah,
yes.
I can hear you.
It has totally different buttons, and I don't have can't even see where the heck to be able to raise hand or have reactions in Skype on this one. So I'm feeling like I'm a real troglodyte, I guess, in coming to the technology side of things here. But I just wanted to go back, Kim, and talk about your principles, your guiding principles that you had there. And I think that that's awesome that you guys are coming up with a common language and that to use. And my only suggestion would be to actually take those 4 things and define them with bullet point definitions. And I'd get to the point of actually posting them so where parents, players, everybody can see it. And so you take it to that next level, and it just becomes who you are. Like you talked about the Wildcat way or whatever, that piece, that it you can point those pieces out. And that's where you can give your coaches a little bit of flexibility to develop their own plans and that piece, but always tying back to those principles that you have, those guiding principles. And I think that you'll find that you have a lot of power, gain a lot of power from that, and consistency that way. And yeah, I really like that idea. And 4 is a good number. The alliteration thing is also a good thing, because it becomes memorable, and that piece, so that you have your foundational pillars. So
Well, I appreciate that. And so where we're going to go from here on it is, if you're going to use, so it has to apply on offense and defense. So let's say it's the U11 team or U11 AA team. I need the 3 or 4 principles to apply on offense and defense, and I want to have a shared vocabulary. So when we're talking about pace on offense, what is it? Is it get north fast? It's got to have a little something like that, right? If it's physicality, right? Get inside position on defense, or whatever those things are. So it's not just, to me, this is too high up right now for the players. They might be able to say, okay, what's an example of poise? What's an example of physicality? But in terms of something you might yell out on the bench or during a practice, you're not going physicality, right? Like that, it's just the overarching principle. So now the task, I think, is, for U11 and U13, you might just go, okay, how do these 4 principles apply on offense and defense? Now you only have 8, you're teaching 8 key things, right? Mm-hmm. With our U15, our U18, you might also add in transition. How does it apply on offense? How does it play on defense? How does it play on transition from offense to defense? Transition from defense to offense. And that's a lot. Now now we're talking about 16 things. And again, those are 16 in my mind. Those are the key concepts, the key vocabulary that everyone needs to understand, right? In order to have success as an individual, as a team. Perhaps one day the U21, the junior team, add something else, another layer onto it. But I do think it has to be consistent, so that if there's 8 key terms like creating 2-on-1s or those types of things that our U11 kids start to talk about, then we just layer upon it as they move up into bantam and midget. So that's the direction I'm trying to take it to, and so that it is consistent and it's not just, me and the junior coach who've coached university hockey creating something that's too high level that doesn't filter down. So I appreciate the insight, Jordan, and we'll see if we can keep the alliteration alive. I'm not sure. I might run out of keywords.
I just want to mention on the one point, you said pace, and I like the idea of bullet points. I sort of put my red flag up when you talk about offensive defense, because there can be bullet points to bullet points to bullet points to bullet points. And to what point does the information, is it too much? Now, when you're talking about pace, and I'm thinking, well, I was worried about physicality and not being able to, you can be fast and gritty, but when pace, there are some cardinal things that are unacceptable, and that is there's a rule of a headman rule. If somebody's open ahead of you, you have to pass the puck. That increases the pace of the game. Nobody can skate a puck faster than headmanning it. And I'm talking about male hockey, one-on-one hockey, selfish hockey, getting people offside when people are open ahead of you. That, to me, it's one of those areas like bad changes that they befuddle me. They're sort of like cardinal things that just shouldn't happen, and they do. And there's no way, there's things you don't need to tippy-toe around some things. That's a team play expectation our way. And it's a rule. And I don't care what level you play at.
So why doesn't that filter? To me, that's thinking a play ahead. That's offense. Think a play ahead. What's going to happen next? Do I speed it up? Do I slow it down?
Oh, that's good.
That's pace.
It's a rule. It's a rule.
Yeah. So for me, the principle, where, I'll be in a graph, right? Like where pace and offense intersect, it's think a play ahead or be a play ahead. Like think a play ahead is all I need. And that's enough to go to a U11 AA player who's 9 years old and say, okay, what did you see there? Did you think a play ahead? Right. So that I'm putting a lot of time and effort into these because I think this can be transformative on an association wide level, right? If you can really, if the key principle is think a play ahead on offense, right? And everything flows into that. I agree. I'm trying not to pigeonhole anyone or discount the fact hockey has so many skills and so many concepts that need to be learned. But to me, that's an excuse to say, oh, there's so much, so let's not. If I can I use the rule of 20%. If we can spend 80% of our time on 20% of stuff and be the best in the league at 20% of the stuff, we're winning a lot of hockey games. If I'm going to waste my time just touching 100% of the stuff, we're never going to be good at any of it. And that's what the girls want to do. They want to be a little bit good on all the things. What I'm saying is we're going to be the best at 20% of the things. And these are the 20%. Our principles are based on the 20% of things that me and my, high performance coaches think are going to get us maximum impact. It doesn't mean we don't touch the other stuff, but that's the stuff we're going to touch the most. And we're going to allocate 80% of our time teaching those things.
Yeah. Well, the game will teach that without you coaching it. If that's a lesson I've learned, because I tried to coach it too deliberately. I was overcoaching. And so at the levels below you, the importance of those fundamental skills, they can be developed just by playing games in small areas and competing and having fun, and they will. And even at your level, I think the most transformational thing is this idea of maximizing the use of the games and the thinking that goes on within a game and asking questions during it. So while these points are really important and we know about them, they're really important for coaches. because those are the questions, the answers you should get when you ask the kids. Well, I've got to be more poised, and you know.
Oh yeah, and we did it with video too, Wally. I filmed
yeah.
10 minutes of practice, and I sent them I said their homework was watch this 5 minutes of this clip and give me 3 specific examples of poise.
Yeah.
Right? But could a U11 or U13 do that? Absolutely they could.
Yeah.
Once you defined, to Jordan's point, what poise is.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that, to me, that's your opportunity to tie it all together. Right? I agree with you completely. The games will teach it, but the coaches need to know what questions to ask. Okay, where do we go wrong with our physicality there? Or how, if they know those are their anchors, that's going to help them out tremendously. I think Darryl's point was a great one, right? You have, with the coaches who are not full-time coaches, right? Like, what are their signposts that they know they must hit? And then how do we riff off of those as they get a little bit more comfortable? I'm confident that having these key principles, will give them those signposts. And it allow me, in going in and mentoring and then mentoring them, saying, okay, well, how are you approaching teaching poise? Give me an example. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, I just think it can get too blown out. There's too many details to cover. And this is a way of reining it in a little bit. And every year re-examining what our principles are going to be, if we decide based on our results that those were not the principles that work best for us. So yeah, I do think it will help to unify and get everyone, thinking the same ideas at least.
Rick?
Thanks, Wally. Kim, on the question of purpose, it's been one of my principles for the longest time. And the way I've stressed it with the players is that whatever you're doing out there, there's no drifting, there's no just hanging around waiting to get involved. Whatever action you take with or without the puck needs to have a purpose to it. You need to determine that. So that could be time and space. It could be pass for a shot, or off the backboards to the front of the net, or off the boards as a redirect pass, or whatever. But we try not to do things just because. And that's why I've focused on it. And it's a word I just use. When I say it, they know what I'm asking. What were you trying to do there? And you need to have a good answer for me and for your group. And as far as the physicality, like one of the things I've always used with the players, and it became particularly pointed with the girls when I took over that involvement, was playing at the long end of the stick. Reaching in instead of getting close, and being able to use the leverage of your bottom hand further down the blade, down the shaft, to get body on body, to then be able to use your knees to leverage yourself into a better position. So I always promoted with them that they should, particularly in a checking role, get into the short end of things, get yourself close to the action. But I like your idea of the 4 principles in particular, because it will guide everyone. Now, they're going to have different interpretations beyond the bullet point part of it. But as long as they're staying with that across the spectrum, you got a pretty good chance of getting some continuity right through your ranks as the kids grow. Does that help?
It's great. And like I said, I'm trying to do right by, 2 different ends of the spectrum, but, we have 5 coaches who can maybe, say they are coaches like this. They spend a large amount of their time focusing on this stuff. And then, all the way down to house league. And so we have 30 competitive coaches, 25 of them are coaches, but, they have a day job, right? And then all the house league ones are the same way, right? And so I don't want to dictate just, on the high performance side of it, but no, it's been a really interesting exercise, again, just working through it and talking to people about it, because it's so easy for me to get caught up in all my years of experience coaching and playing and all of that and think what's right for me, but that's not necessarily right for the whole organization. And so, being open about it has really uncovered some really cool things for me so far in this new role. So it's been a great learning opportunity. So thank you.
Well, I
Yep.
feel by the way you approached it, by asking others to create this list rather than just dictate it, it gives you the opportunity to present it that way, with the comment that it will be open, as you said, to revision on a seasonal basis, and you're wanting that input. That would foster more people becoming proactively involved with it as opposed to fighting it, to see how it works, how can I use this as a guiding point, and I'm going to have a chance to influence this at some point.
Kim, I have a question about your 4 principles, and asking the coaches have developed the principles, and then the coaches at each level, what do you think the bullet points would be at the house level? Would the 4 points be the same general points, but the sub points at the next level, but then the how to achieve it, they may not have the expertise to adapt a drill. They might just be able to let them play games and have fun, and they'll get there. But that line between, I'm just suggesting that, are those 4 your principles the same across the system, house to competitive? And if they are, what would be the sub points? And you'd find this out. What does it mean to the coaches at that level? What would be their sub points? And I don't know that I would put offense and defense at the house level. That's something you might do a questionnaire with. Just put down some sub points, bullet points related to what does this mean, and they'll probably write. The house people will probably put down some common sense, practical things that you will be able to give them game ideas to, special rules games that they can play, that they'll learn them. So the challenge moving up the ladder is, how much is too much? Because I think in my case, it was too much knowledge was harmful. And the lesson I've learned, and it's reflecting the way I approach coaching now, is do less, say less. And like Darryl said, the student is the teacher. And like Dom said, the game teaches. So it's a nice balance. You're in a great situation to be experimenting with this. And boy, what a day to have Darryl Belfry on. It was just incredible. It completely surprised me when he asked to join yesterday, and I texted Saul wondering whether he would be on, but it's great to have Darryl on for sure. Tom,
I've got a comment, and my enlightenment in coaching was working with the Finnish. Like Erica Westerlund was the head of Finnish hockey, and when Johanni and I did that book together, we developed a program for Austria, which is kind of like Kim's doing right now. Is everything what they do is they conceptualize the game that you're either on offense or defense, and the 4 game playing roles. The first 2 on offense, you either have the puck or you're supporting the puck, and then on defense, you're checking the puck carrier or you're covering away from the puck. And everything I do now is based on those principles, and all the organization I do is based on those principles. And I just think it makes thinking about the game so much easier, and organizing practice and season plans and everything like that. And and then there's 3 situations, which is offense, defense, and loose puck. And in hockey, the puck is loose about close to 30% of the time, depending on what level. On a real unskilled level, more than that, and really skilled level, less. And if you plan everything around those principles, you can pull everything together, and it just I just think it's way easier to conceptualize a game and to organize things. So that's how the Finns do it, and basically the Swedes do it, and that sort of thing.
No, I like the idea, and I started using a couple of years ago, play with the puck and play without the puck, and it gave me a different way of teaching the game that because when you are on offense, you can be playing without the puck if you are not the person carrying the puck, right?
And that's the second game playing role.
Yeah, so because I found, you know, if I try to teach the game in the silos, okay, now we're working on breakout, and now we're working on power play, and it then becomes too overwhelming because you go, okay, I have 8 silos and I have 80 minutes. There's no way I'm going to fit everything in 2 practices a week. So I appreciate the idea of having that fluidity, and that, you know, when I did finally establish some key concepts and some key vocabulary for myself in the way that I wanted to teach things and the way my assistants were teaching things, it opened up this whole other world. Like the drills and the systems were no longer in isolation, right? They moved very differently, and the players understood them differently, and I saw it in their gameplay. So I think the power of this is really in the shared vocabulary. I think the curriculum piece is easy. I can come up with all the drills. Like that to me is easy. But the transformational part for the players and the coaches and the teams will be that vocabulary and that consistency, right? So, you know, if someone's talking about thinking a play ahead, yes, we may use different examples of that, but a player moving up level by level, age group by age group, is going to have heard that term before.
Well,
And
I
to
agree
me,
with
that's
that.
very powerful.
Like we have 4 practices a week, but when I coach minor hockey, usually 2 practices a week. And I rotate through the game playing roles. So practice 1, we do individual offensive skills, and we do that, some of those every practice, but that will be the teaching points as individual offensive skills. And then, well, that's Monday in the college. On Tuesday, we work on individual defensive skills, and that'll be the teaching points after the warm up and sort of thing like this. And then we'll work on team offense and then team defense. And if you have, you know, just 2 practices, you can work on 2 of those principles each practice, or just 1 and rotate through. But what happens is, in this way, you can go through and basically you can cover everything, and you don't say, oh, geez, I coached with a guy. He asked me to help him coach the St. men's team 3 years ago. And I recorded what we did. And what happened is the team defense and the team didn't play good defense. I looked at all the stuff we did and what I classify. There's hardly any team defense that we worked on, you know. And I came in, they went on a 9-game losing streak when I took over the women. And not just because of that, but like he didn't adapt how you have to kill penalties to the 1-3-1, and teams started killing them on it. And I came back, and right away he sat down and he says, okay, show me that penalty kill. And he had me teach it. And then he had me go over, you know, defensive zone coverage and walk everybody through it again. And then we started winning again, and we won a playoff series. And I just think it's just such an easy way to organize everything. And that's why I'm telling you about it. Because I did this also in teaching. My last 15 years of teaching, I was getting classes, like double classes. So between 48 and 60 kids in a 3 badminton court gym, which is just a little bigger than a official size volleyball court.